record on this computer. Okay, I got it.
Alt-R. Sorry, you
Yeah,
got it?
I got it.
Yeah,
We are now recording. Okay, welcome. My name is Mark Lehman. And as I said before, I'm a co-director for York Pool Services, Richmark Pool Services, and Etobicoke Pool Services. This presentation tonight is the basics of pool ownership and how pools work. We're going to be covering approximately, I think it's about an hour worth of material. And we're going to go in depth into as much as possible for the scope of an entry-level presentation like this. Am I sharing? Can everyone see my screen share?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah.
Good. So there are three partners also present in the meeting. We have Jonathan Adams, who is the area manager for Etobicoke Pool Services, which is everything south of Steeles, pretty much east of Bayview. We don't have coverage, west of Bayview, excuse me. We don't have coverage in the east side of Toronto yet, but Jonathan covers everything from the Mississauga, Etobicoke border all the way to North York, to pretty much Bayview. And Doug Bonner represents Richmark Pool Services, which covers Richmond Hill, Markham, and Aurora areas. And York Pool Services covers all of Vaughan from, I would say, the west side of Yonge Street all the way to Kleinburg, north of Highway 7, or north of Steeles, essentially. And the three of us together are one company, just divided into sub-offices. But all three companies are providing this presentation to you tonight. So we're going to get into... okay, let me start this from the beginning. There we go. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about the basic concept of a pool first, and we'll break down each component to make sure that you understand each thing on the micro and the macro of what it is and how it works. For all intents and purposes, a swimming pool is a vessel of water. It can be contained either by a vinyl liner, a fiberglass shell, or it can be a concrete pool. But for all intents and purposes, it doesn't really matter for this presentation. What's important is how the water leaves the pool, gets treated, and gets returned back to the pool. So most pools have, at the very minimum, a skimmer, which is depicted in the picture here. I don't know if you guys can actually see my mouse cursor. Yeah, you should be able to. And then the skimmer usually is connected directly to pump, and the pump to a filter, to a heater, and in the case of a saltwater pool, to a saltwater chlorine generator, and then the water then goes back to the pool. Now, in case this depiction is a little bit taken too literally, the equipment is usually not underneath the swimming pool. It's just shown this way to depict a circuit. So we're going to talk about each component in the order of what's called the pool circuit, and we'll start with the pool skimmer in depth. So I'm sure everyone knows that their pool has some variation or version of this. And the skimmer has two purposes. One, it is designed to capture anything floating on the surface of the pool, unwanted items. And it also provides the pump with a source of water to begin the pool circuit. Okay. Important when you're discussing a pool skimmer is to note that, and a big thing I want you to take away from this presentation is getting the nomenclature right. So that little door, on a lot of pools, that door has fallen off. But that little door is called a weir. And a lot of people, when they communicate with us, they call the little basket that sits in the skimmer, they call that a filter, which technically it is a filter, but it does create a bit of confusion to call it that if you're referring to the strainer basket. So essentially, the water has to be at least I would say 50% across the opening of the skimmer's mouth for the pump to be satisfied and get enough water to satisfy the suction demand of the pump. And what ends up happening is that suction occurs in a pipe or a hole at the bottom of the skimmer, causing a bit of a flow of water into the skimmer, and anything that is floating on top of the surface of the pool will get trapped in the strainer basket. And then, of course, you can then from periodically open up the hatch on your deck and take the basket out and dump it and put it back. It's very important on pools to remember to clean out this, especially if your pool doesn't have a main drain, and this is the only source of suction for the pump. It's very important to make sure that your skimmer basket is emptied regularly, because if it's fully saturated with debris or leaves, you're essentially choking out your pump. And if you choke out your pump, you're not filtering, you're not circulating properly, the heater will stop working, the chlorine generating system or the salt system will stop working. So for all you fiberglass pools, you usually don't have a main drain. So it's very, very critical to make sure that you keep your skimmer basket as clean. Now I'm talking about
quick question. Sorry, you mentioned main drain twice. What do you mean by main drain?
Okay, it's going to come up in the next slide. I will show you. There's a couple variations of it, but it's essentially that round circle at the bottom of your deep end. If you have one, many pools do not have a main drain. It's a nice benefit to have, but in fact, some pools, their main drain is not to code, and when you get your liner changed, they end up filling it with concrete, and the liner just is manufactured continuous right over it. So it's essentially a suction at the very bottom of your deep end.
In the chat feature.
Okay.
Sorry,
Mark. And we'll talk. Yeah.
Sorry, question. When you say empty the skimmer regularly, what is your definition of regularly?
There's no good answer to that. It depends on how wooded your backyard is and the time of year. If you have a tree that drops a lot of stuff right over your pool, it might be every day for you. It might be twice a day for all I know. Especially for those in very mature areas like Forest Hill. I know Johnny in Etobicoke deals with a lot of much more mature pools. I've seen pools where you have to really stay on it. You'll have to notice when the basket gets really clogged with stuff. You kind of maybe have to give it a chance and see how long it takes for it to get saturated with stuff. And it might only be in the spring. Once you hit June, it may not be an issue.
Hey,
Thank
Mark,
you.
I wanted to touch on one thing that I've noticed a lot lately. When that basket becomes full of debris, there is a handle in that basket for you to reach down and pull it out of the skimmer.
Good one.
And I've seen a lot of broken ones. So I would advise you to turn off the pump so there's no suction, so you're able to lift that basket easily.
Yeah, that's if you've let it get really saturated, then the suction will, if the whole thing is filled with leaves, and the suction will really hold it down. He's 100% right. And on the equator and jacuzzi baskets, the handle is almost designed to purposely break off so that you don't break the basket. And if you have a waterway skimmer, which is common on a lot of fiberglass pools, the basket has a locking mechanism. It twists a little bit. You don't have to actually use that locking mechanism. Most skimmers don't have that feature. And frankly, I don't really know why it's included as a feature, but I prefer when I service a pool, I don't even use that locking system because I don't want the basket to ever get stuck. Okay, but anyhow, at the bottom of the skimmer under the basket, you'll usually find at least one hole where if the pump is running and you put your fingers by that hole, you will feel an intense suction of water. And that is basically the pump pulling the water from the pool. Okay, so you got the weir and the basket. Very important to call that a hair and lint basket or a strainer basket, not to refer to that as a filter. Although technically it is a form of filter, but it's more of a strainer basket. This is what a skimmer looks like before the backfill gets put all around your pool. This mouth over here is what's bolted onto the wall of your pool. And this particular version is a Hayward brand one. Okay, and you can see here, this is where the plumbing gets glued to the skimmer under the ground. And this is what the basket looks like for a Hayward. We'll talk about the different brands. So some of you may have at the very bottom of your pool, you may have a main drain. We're going to touch on main drain a little bit more later, but right now I want to touch on a specific kind of main drain. It's known as an equalizer, and you find it on pools that are a little bit older. So what they used to do is, you see in this configuration, you just have the one pipe leading to the pump, okay? And that's the suction. On the configuration on the right, you have a pipe that's leading to the pump, but then you have another pipe coming from a drain at the bottom of the pool, and it also leads to the skimmer. You'll see two holes in the bottom of some skimmers. In many pools that don't have a main drain, there's a permanent plug placed in this hole because the skimmer comes from the factory with two ports to plumb it up. So if you don't have a main drain, sometimes the builder will put a plug here on this hole, and you're never meant to open that plug. But if you do have an equalizer, I will explain exactly how it works. So the equalizer essentially is like for all intents and purposes, for you guys, the way to understand it is like a backup system. So if you do have one, and this red clump here symbolizes a lot of debris in the skimmer basket. So essentially this red clump chokes out the suction of the pump, and the water has no other place to get sucked from. So what will happen in this scenario is the main drain will start sucking and do a U-turn. Okay, and it's called an equalizer because wherever the water level in the pool is, it pushes up this pipe and it will equalize with the water level. So if the water level was here, it would be equal in here. That's why they call it an equalizer. But essentially, it's like a backup system if your skimmer gets plugged with debris. If you don't have one, then it's all the more reason to clean out your skimmer basket from time to time. And there is probably an extra step if you're vacuuming a pool and your pool has an equalizer. But again, I want to stress that this is found on older pools typically. On a more modern pool, the main drain is plumbed all the way to the pump, and there's a manifold on the pump, meaning there's a couple valves, and you can control the suction using those valves, whether you want the suction to draw from the skimmer or the main drain or both. Okay. And it has the same effect. If the skimmer gets completely saturated with debris, obviously the path of least resistance, the water will suck from the main drain. But what happens is this pipe over here, rather than being plumbed to the skimmer, will be plumbed side by side with the skimmer directly to the pump. And there'll be valves there. And I'll show you, we'll touch on that a little bit further on. But essentially, if your pool has this type of setup, it's important to understand what it looks like. So the rule of thumb is that the hole that's closest to the pool is usually the one that's leading to the main drain. And if you put your finger near there, you won't feel any suction because it's just a pipe that leads to the bottom of the pool. And the hole furthest from the pool is the one that's leading to the pump. Okay, and sometimes the builder decides for redundancy to plumb instead of putting a plug in this hole, let's say the pool doesn't have a main drain, he plumbs two pipes in tandem, both to the pump. And I can only speculate that maybe that's being done for redundancy, or that it's being done in case someone wants to use one of those old style automatic vacuums, and it occupies one hole in the skimmer and the other hole still provides suction so that the skimmer skims. Okay, so it's important to figure out which setup you have. Okay, let's look at the different brands. If you ever have to replace a skimmer basket, the easiest thing to do is take your lid to a local pool store. So here you see this is Hayward, and Hayward is identified by the square plate with the cross hatches on it. If you flip this lid over, there's an H on the bottom, the Hayward logo. And this is what the basket looks like. So if this looks familiar to you, you likely have a Hayward skimmer basket or Hayward skimmer. This one here is Jacuzzi, and it's a round lid. These little logos in concentric circles, that's the old Jacuzzi logo. And it's got a little notch on the lid. And this is that handle that I was describing that will easily break off if on purpose, in fact, if the basket is filled with debris and you try to pull it out too hard. Equator has the same basket, and it has this lid, and you can identify it with the concentric circles. And for those of you with the fiberglass pools, Leisure typically would build with this brand of skimmer. This is called a waterway skimmer, and the basket usually has this handle on it. And you can't see it from this picture, but there's like flat edges here designed to help you lock by twist locking this basket into the skimmer. And be careful, sometimes the builders mix and match the top of the skimmer with a different bottom. So you might have a Hayward fascia that sits on your pool deck that they encased, let's say, in the concrete, because that's what the guy had in his truck, but the actual lower skimmer is jacuzzi. I've seen that before. I even have a customer where he's got two skimmers on his pool, and one skimmer is jacuzzi brand and the other one's Hayward brand. We just saw that the other day. Okay, any questions about the skimmer? It should be pretty straightforward. It's just an opening where the water leaves the pool, and there's a suction at the bottom, and essentially that suction helps the basket collect debris and also provides the pump with the beginning of the pool circuit, the suction.
I would say the most important part of the skimmer is the water level. The minimum halfway up the opening to about 3/4 or about an inch of air, just so you can allow the debris to float over into it. But the pump is so powerful that not lower than halfway, and if it's above the opening, it's really doing nothing for you. It'll still pump, but it's not going to remove.
Right. You'll still get circulation, but you won't skim. Exactly. That's a really good point. So if the water level gets too low on the skimmer, what starts to happen is the skimmer will start to make a slurping noise. Okay, and that slurping is really the sound of the pump getting air into it. And if the pump intakes air, it will deprime, meaning it'll lose. Depriming means it'll lose its grip on the water. The pool pumps are really good at moving water. They're really bad at moving air. So if you let this water level get too low, the suction is more powerful than the speed at which the water can cascade in here. So essentially it'll start slurping, and what'll happen is you'll get this cavitation. The pump will slurp, and then all of a sudden the pump will lose its prime. You'll have no circulation, and then the pump will slowly build up a prime again, and it'll start to snowball, and you'll get that slurping sound again, and it'll lose its cavitation. It'll lose its prime again. So that type of like regular cavitation, we're talking about every 30 seconds to a minute, is usually an indication your water level in the pool is too low. So add some more. Now, if the water level's above the skimmer, that could happen from excessive rain. You're still getting pool circulation, but the skimmer will not skim because obviously it needs to be within the mouth of the skimmer to do its skimming job.
Quick question.
Yeah.
If the skimmer's slurping, essentially because it's taking in a lot of air, could that negatively impact the pump? Because sometimes they go, water level goes down. Would that hurt the pump for any long period of time?
Yeah, the pump works best under the load of the water. So in a way, the water probably provides a certain degree of cooling to the pump. And that load is if you have a really keen ear, you can hear the difference. Technically, yeah, the pump should not be running dry. And it is a bad thing for the pool for the pump to run dry for an extended period.
Thank you.
This is the most common pump on the pool market. It's known as the Hayward Super Pump. You see pretty much, I would say, 50% of all pools, basic pools, have this pump. On the newer pools, they're getting the newer version of Hayward, but this is still the most common pump on the market. The picture, the gold portion is the motor, and the black portion over here is known as the wet end. And inside the pump, there's another basket for all the debris that happened to get past the skimmer basket. So there's a secondary redundancy to make sure that debris doesn't get into the pump's impeller. So there's another basket that you need to clean out regularly from time to time. And we're going to talk about some of the nuances of doing that. The hole, this is considered the front of the pump. Hole here on the horizontal is the intake, and the hole here on the vertical is the output. Okay, just so you know which way the pump works. And this is a sight glass window, so you can actually see inside the pump. It's an interesting, it's a good exercise to watch and see what a pump looks like while it's priming up. So you can actually witness water coming from this hole, slowly filling this chamber. And ultimately, if the pump is fully primed, you'll see so much water saturation inside this window that it'll actually look like there's nothing in there at all. It'll be completely, a perfect environment has this window almost entirely airless. You see pure water in there. I've even had calls of people calling me saying that their pump's not working, but they feel water flow at their jets. And I'm like, that's not possible. And they didn't realize that they were looking at pure water in there, and there were no air bubbles, so that they had no perception that there was actually water flow. Okay. When you do, this is the pump basket on the super pump. When you do open the pump, sometimes this gasket or this O-ring here likes to get dislodged. It's very critical that you put that O-ring back if it comes out, and that it's seated nicely. If you don't, the pump will not prime up properly. Okay. And if the pump doesn't prime, the whole system ceases to work correctly. Another thing is the basket usually has only one way that it goes in. And on the super pump, this basket, if this basket doesn't sit below this entrance hole on the inside of the pump, then you've put the basket in the wrong way. You can't see from this picture, but the basket is rhombus shaped. So it really does only have one way. And if you look on this part of the basket, it'll say front here. On other baskets, there is a hole over here as well. That hole should line up with this hole on the inside of the chamber. Okay. And if there is any bit of air leak on the suction side coming between the skimmer and the pump, it won't leak water on the suction side. That's just physics. What happens is, instead of it leaking water, it'll suck in air, and that air will be manifested as you'll see air inside the pump chamber. So oftentimes, if this fitting here is not tight, or there isn't enough Teflon on it, or there's an air leak in this line, the pool may not lose water. And to a certain degree, if it's minor on that side of the plumbing, some people just live with it because the pool doesn't lose water and it's pumping good enough. So, but on this side of the plumbing, if you do have a leak, it tends to spray water. Yeah, so the super pump here has these two little levers. The sight glass goes into these two notches, and then it pushes down against this gasket, and then you pull these levers up above it and then twist them down. And if you've built a pool recently, chances are your builder upsold you on a variable speed pump. So this is I guess, the LED light bulb of pumps. If you understand that a pump running that's only one speed is using, full, let's say 1200 watts constantly, a variable speed pump allows you to dial the speed down or up depending on what you're doing at that moment in time. There is essentially a curve where you can lower the speed just enough that the pool has adequate circulation. The heater will work at that speed and the pump will work, but if you go too slow, the heater won't register the flow, and the salt system may not register the flow either, and you may not be turning over the water enough times per day or per hour. So a variable speed pump can be great. You can turn the speed down, and the more you turn the speed down, the less energy you're consuming. And you can usually, we tell our customers, the general rule is the premium that you pay for a variable speed pump tends to pay you back in electricity savings in 2 years. So, so they're definitely worth it if you built a new pool and you're planning to save as much energy as possible. Now, when you go to vacuum the pool, you're going to want much more suction, so you can go to the variable speed pump and turn up the power.
So a
If
quick
there are-
question. So I was contemplating, replacing my pump because it
Mhm.
died last year with a variable pump, but the price was triple. So I didn't bother. But you think you might get some savings in, 2+ years?
Well,
How,
I know.
how,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, well, I guess one of the questions is how frequently or how long do people leave their pumps on through the summer? Do they leave it on constantly? Is that kind of a rough calculation there?
So, okay, well, that's a bit of a complicated question. Some people run their pool on a timer, and some people manually go out there and turn their pump off. If you're new to pools, I wouldn't recommend doing that just because it adds another gear in a complex machine as it is. I would wait until you have a large comfort level with the pool before you understand the implications of what it means to turn the pump off. But I guess, what was your question again?
So really, I think the question is how do people leave their pumps on all the time in the summer? So you get the benefits of that variable speed, let's say price saving,
I
or do
would
people only leave their pumps on sort of like throughout the night, 5
Right.
hours a day?
Right. So most people with the variable speed pump don't use this feature, but a lot of them have it. There's a timer built into the computer that you see on top of the motor there, and you can actually program schedules. But the problem is, especially if you're saltwater, and most people are, when you stop your pump, you're no longer making chlorine anymore. So you then have to compensate by adjusting the chlorine system, the salt generation chlorine system higher to make double the amount of chlorine because you're running the pump for half the day. But what it does to your chlorine curve is it produces more of a sine wave to your chlorine production over time. And we like to see it's more desirable, I would say, especially if you're new to pools, to simply dial in a low speed and leave it running all the time. Most people in the northeastern seaboard leave their pump on all the time. It's more common, I think, on the West Coast where they're using their pool all year round, and in hot climates to use timers. But there are a lot of people that do use timers. But again, you have to understand the implications of what it means to shut the pump off. But I can tell you right now, I know, can think of even one gentleman that's in the meeting who we put in a variable speed pump. I think it was last year. You can actually see on the screen of the pump the watt consumption. So if a single speed pump is consuming 1,200 watts and you're able to run the pump at 25% the speed, even assuming if the relationship is linear, you have to assume you're running at 350 watts at that point. That's a considerable amount of savings on electricity.
Any idea what the rough cost per summer would be for just running the pump for a hydro perspective?
I can't tell you offhand now, but if you want, you can get in touch with me. I'll look up the rates and we can do a calculation together. It's hard to say. It depends
okay.
on.
I'm sure I can Google it. I was just wondering if you had a rough
Right.
idea.
Well, again, a single speed about 1,200 watts. A variable speed, let's say running at 25% power, 350 watts. So whatever the calculation is, divided by 4 for us to go from single speed to variable speed.
Okay.
I just wanted to speak to that question with my experiences. All my customers with a single speed pump will leave it running 24 hours a day, and that's at max speed, a single speed. The people with variable speed pumps, the only times you really need to have it at max speed is if you're vacuuming for an hour, if you just added chlorine shock and you need the chemicals to circulate
And mix, yeah.
or if it's being used a high bather load. So let's say a Saturday afternoon, you have a party, you want it on high speed. So let's call that 5 hours. But all the other times they're dialing it back to like maybe half the speed, just enough to adequately run their devices.
Another good point about the variable speeds, if you have a cartridge filter, right, and the filter is getting a little older and the cartridge filter doesn't make it through the summer without needing to be cleaned. On a new filter, maybe you'll get through the summer without needing to clean the cartridge filter. But let's say your filter is starting to get dirty and it's starting to stymie the flow of water. I can't tell you how many times we get calls from customers. My heater stopped working. My heater's like, something's wrong with my heater. The first thing we say to customers is, maybe your filter's dirty. Check your water level on the pool. Check the skimmer basket. Check the pump basket. Check to see if your pump is primed up. Because if you don't have enough water flow, the heater will not turn on. It needs a certain amount of water flow to turn on. So in many cases with a variable speed pump, if the pump's running at 25% power, maybe that was fine when the cartridges were clean. But as the cartridges get dirty, the pump is not pushing enough water through those dirty cartridges to satisfy the pressure switch in the heater for it to turn on. So you have two choices at that point. You can either take the cartridges out and power wash them, or let's say you don't have time to do that and you have a party, you can dial the speed up on the pump to power through that dirtiness so that you get the heater up and running again and the system working nominally. Just for people's, like, you'll know your own pool. These are what the Hayward pumps typically look like. The variable speeds they look almost like exactly like this, except there's a computer sitting on top of the motor. These are the two common Hayward brands. This is the TriStar one on the right and the Super Pump on the left. There's also a Super 2, which looks like this, except it has a round glass window. Jandy pumps look like this. The lid on this style twists off, and sometimes it can be very hard to get off. It's a good idea to keep a rubber mallet handy in case you don't have the power to twist this off. You can tap the handle in the direction of counterclockwise to take the lid off. There's again, they all have O-rings, so you always want to make sure that you put the O-ring back, otherwise the pump won't prime up properly. Jandy pumps look like this. Pentair is the most identifiable because it's usually beige. All of their equipment is beige. Again, it's a twist off lid. This is Stay Right, which is also Pentair now, and this is the older Stay Right on the right. Both of these have twist off lids as well.
Hey, Mark, quick question. What's the average life of a pump?
Oh, that depends. All of this equipment is dependent upon the chemistry of the water. The chemistry of the water is incredibly profound in terms of the duration of the equipment on the pool. I've seen people destroy pumps in a year easily by accidentally having their pool over chlorinated, which is very easy to do on a saltwater pool. And I've seen pumps last like 5 to 10 years. You have to remember, anything that has a moving part vibrates, it's outside, and it's exposed to harsh chemicals all the time. So it's hard to say. It depends on how well you take care of the chemistry. Remember that the parts of the pump, even plastics, are subject to poor chemistry, and the seals, the part that keeps the water out of the motor, they're all subject to the chemistry of the water. And we're not really going to go too much into chemistry tonight. If you want, I'm happy to talk for hours about it. If you want, after the presentation, you want to talk chemistry, I will do it. But for now, the answer to your question is, I've seen them go in a year, and I've seen them last 10 years. The warranty is usually a year on them. If you buy a trade grade level, it's usually about 2 years, and they claim that there's stainless steel shafts and upgraded seals, but I'm skeptical whether it's just marketing gobbledygook.
He's making fun of you for raising your hand.
Okay, thank you.
Who does
Mark?
someone have a question?
Yeah, Mark.
I can't see everyone, so please just speak up. We're a small enough group. Go ahead.
Okay, Mark. If you mentioned we have a Hayward super pump. I'm pretty sure it's not variable speed, that I know.
Okay.
But is there a need for cleaning out the basket that's in the pump? And if there is, what's the frequency of it?
Again, you notice all these pumps have clear sight glass windows on top. You
Yes.
should be able to inspect and look inside and see that the basket does need to be cleaned out.
Okay.
It all depends on how wooded your backyard is. And also depends on how you vacuum your pool. There's two ways of vacuuming. You can vacuum by bypassing the skimmer basket, and you can vacuum with the skimmer basket and get the debris to go into the skimmer basket. I'll touch on that closer to the end of the presentation.
Okay.
So we talked about the skimmer, we talked about the pump. We're going to talk now about filters. So most pools have either the one on the left or the one on the right. And you should know which one you have. The one on the left is a sand filter, and the one on the right is a cartridge filter.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay, and then the
doesn't
sand
look like
filter
that. It's
has
similar.
a big valve on top called a multi-port valve, and it's got 5 positions. And the cartridge filter has a belt around its waist usually, and it separates like an egg to remove the cartridges from inside. Okay, the cartridge filter has less moving parts, I have to say. You do pay a premium for a cartridge filter. And to clean it, you have to open it up and power wash the cartridges, or you can immerse them in a solution in a big vat. And the debris will come off. But they both have their advantages and disadvantages, and we'll talk about both. There is a valve on top of a cartridge filter, but it's only to release an air bubble that will form in the top. Both of them have pressure gauges on them, and we'll talk about what they mean. But let's talk about the sand filter first. A sand filter usually has 3 lines connected to it. Sometimes this third line over here is just a rolled up fire hose that you have to roll out. It's hard to see in this picture, but you have this line over here that's coming from the pump, and it's hiding behind it over here. This line over here is the line that continues the pool circuit. Okay, the valve on top of the filter should never be. You should never move this valve with the pump running. It is a very sensitive contraption, and you should be stopping the pump every time you move this valve. If any of you have ever driven a manual car before, think of it like pressing the clutch before you shift gears. You really want to stop the flow of water before you move this valve. So each time this valve gets moved for backwashing, please stop your pump. Okay. The internal part of the sand filter looks like this. You've got this pipe here called the stand pipe, and the device on the bottom here that looks kind of like a starfish, those are called the laterals. Okay, we call the multi-port valve, the slang, we call it the head, but it's really an MPV or a multi-port valve. Okay, essentially this thing has silica sand in it, or an alternative to silica sand in some cases, filled up approximately 75% of the way. There's a label on your filter, and it'll tell you exactly how many pounds and what type of silica sand your filter takes. A 24-inch filter usually takes 300 pounds of sand, but check your label, always read your manufacturer's instructions. The water will enter the filter, and it's hard to see in this picture, but in this around the stand pipe, there are slits over here in this black area. So the water emerges from the pump, and it comes out of these slits, and it forces the water through all the sand that is in this tank, and the pressure is forced down, and these laterals capture the water at the end after it's passed through all the sand. And the laterals have little slits in them that are just small enough to let the water pass through, but not the particles of sand. And then the water will flow back up this white pipe in filter mode, and then back out and continue back to the pool. Okay, so the sand is essentially trapping all the particles, the microscopic particles in it. Okay, and obviously all filters have a drain plug, but unless you winterize your own pool, you don't really have to know much about the drain plugs on the equipment. So we'll talk about what this valve, all the positions of this valve and what it does. If you have a cartridge filter on your pool, you don't really need to pay attention to this section, but I mean, some of you have this style and some of you have the cartridge, so I got to go through both. So you got filtration mode, waste, winter mode, closed, backwash, recirculate, and rinse. I'm not going to go through the ones that you're really not going to use that often, and mostly they're for diagnostic purposes, like recirculate and closed and winter, unless you winterize your own pool, you'll probably just use filtration mode, backwash mode, rinse, and maybe you'll use waste if you need to drain the pool. Filtration mode is usually at 12 o'clock, and that's where you'll find the filter when the pump is running and when it's filtering. And what that looks like inside the filter is you've got, as I described before, the red arrows are showing the water coming in, and this area here shows the sand, and the yellow dots are the particles, and they're forced right through the sand, and then the laterals pick up the clean water and force it back out and goes to the next item in the pool. Okay, eventually the sand will become completely saturated with particles, and the sand filter will need to be cleaned, and the term for that is called backwashing. Okay, again, if you have a cartridge filter, this does not apply to you. Okay, only those of you that have sand filters. Now, the interval of backwashing could be every week, it could be every 2 weeks. It depends on how new your sand is. It depends on how wooded your backyard is and what have you. But we'll talk about how to know when it's time to backwash. Backwashing on most filters is exactly 180 degrees, or at 6 o'clock, to the filtration mode. It's usually at the bottom here. Again, remember to stop your pump. Backwashing essentially reroutes the flow of water so that the water goes backwards through the filter. So instead of the filter pushing the water out into this area here, the water gets pushed into this lateral and out the laterals at the bottom. And what it does is it agitates the sand so that the sand can release all of the particles. And then rather than routing it back to the pool, it routes it to a waste line or a waste hose, cleaning out the sand and allowing you to use the filter clean again. Just bear in mind that you are using the pool's water to actually clean out the filter. So the process of backwashing does lower the water line of the pool. Okay, so you want to typically make sure that your pool has enough water in it before you start a backwash, because if you backwash for like 2 minutes and your pool is not very big, you could lower the water below to the lowest point of the skimmer, and then you're gonna lose pump prime afterwards. Okay, so usually our technicians, when they arrive to a house, they'll, no matter what, they'll just put the garden hose in the pool for the duration of the time that they're vacuuming the pool, just to gain maybe a ½ inch or an inch just while they're there, so that they have enough water to do their backwash and not diminish the water line of the customer's pool. When you're done backwashing, you should run the filter in a rinse for at least 20 to 30 seconds. That essentially runs the filter like a filter, but it wastes just a little bit of water, again, cleaning out the filtration system before you reroute the water back to the pool. Okay, it's not really as important to you to understand how rinse works as much as just know that after you're finished backwashing, you put the filter in a rinse and run the pump for 30 seconds, stop the pump. Usually at that point, we like to take the opportunity to clean out the pump basket, and then you put the filter back in filter mode, and you now have a clean filter again. Okay, waste is a very basic function. It just bypasses the entire filter assembly altogether and just lowers the water line of the pool. So if you have, if you let's say you don't want to backwash, you just want to lower the water line because it rained a lot, you might opt to use waste mode. Okay. Winter mode is just where we leave the filter during the winter, and it just leaves all the plumbing open so that it can breathe. Closed is really just for diagnostic. If we want to pressure test lines, you would really not use it for everyday use. There's also recirculate. That's also more of a diagnostic mode for a technician. It really just bypasses the filter, and the water goes right through the head, unfiltered, back through the heater back to the pool. It's really mostly for a diagnostic. So the filters then, they each have a pressure gauge on them, whether they're cartridge or sand. And the pressure sort of indicates to you how dirty the filter is. Now, for every pool, it's different. The clean pressure could be different for, person A's pool and person B's pool. So the rule of thumb is when your pressure rises about 10 PSI higher than your clean pressure, that usually indicates your sand is in need of it's time to backwash the filter or perhaps clean the cartridges. On some of these pressure gauges, you can see there's like a moving bezel, kind of like on a diver's watch. And you can see on the one on the left here, you've got this start triangle and the clean filter triangle. So if you've just finished backwashing, wherever this needle is, let's say it's on 10 PSI, you would rotate this bezel so that the start arrow is on the 10, and then the clean arrow will move with it approximately to where the 20 is, so that you can see when the needle rises, let's say your clean pressure was 20, when the needle rises to here, you can see it's time to backwash. This is one version. Another version is this one here, where the bezel is a knob in the middle. So you have this black pointer here, which is your actual pressure, and the green and the red move with this bezel knob, and they just have a 10 PSI spread. So you can line up the green arrow with the black arrow. Now be careful with a variable speed pump, because it's important to read the pressure always at the same speed on the pump, because obviously if you increase the speed on the pump, the pressure will go up. So if you run the pump at 25% power and then it's reading 10 PSI, obviously the PSI is going to read 20 at full power, let's say, but that doesn't mean the filter's dirty. So it's important to judge the pressure based on the same speed all the time. So if you have a single speed pump, it's very simple. Wherever the clean pressure is, 10 PSI higher than that, that's time to clean the filter or backwash.
Hey, Mark, what sort of percentage of people have sand versus filtered?
Ooh, most new pools now are being outfitted with cartridge. Cartridge filters don't waste water because you have to backwash. The cartridges tend to have a smaller micron size of particle that they filter out. It is annoying to have to dismantle a cartridge filter and use a power washer to clean the cartridges. But if your filter was sized properly for the pool and your cartridges are new, in many cases, you can get through the entire summer without having to clean the cartridges. So with sand filters, you have to backwash. We do it every service call, no matter what. If you have a sand filter, even if it doesn't show as dirty, we just do a little bit of a backwash. But it's more involved, and if you don't have a line plumbed to the sewer or to waste, you have to roll out a hose, which can be cumbersome and annoying to have to roll out a hose to the street all the time. I think Sean wants to mention something. Go ahead, Sean. Sean keeps a second set of cartridges handy, by the way. So in case, let's say he has guests and his cartridges end up being dirty, he can then swap out his cartridges, and when he has time to power wash, he can do it at a later date. We include cleaning of the cartridges at the closing, by the way, and then we put them back clean. So, okay. So more on sand filters. These are just the different brands. Again, Pentair is usually beige, Hayward, Jandy, they all relatively work and look the same. A lot of the company is incestuous and they share different parts and they brand with each other's names on it. I feel like someone had a question or wanted to speak up. Okay, I'll continue. I can give you these instructions again. I don't want to dwell on them, and I really don't want you to take notes tonight. These are the instructions for backwashing. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, does the pressure show 10 PSI higher than the clean pressure? So if it does, time to backwash. And a really, really advanced indication that you need to backwash is perhaps your heater and your salt system are not working and they're not registering the flow of water. That's really, if you let it get really bad. Okay, and part of step one, if you have a hose connected to your filter, you want to roll out your backwash hose if it's not plumbed to the drainage. And sometimes on some properties, there's a rigid or plumbed pipe pumped to another location, and then there's a hose over there somewhere on the side of the house that just to reduce the amount of hose you have to roll out. It depends on how your builder built your pool. So of course you're going to move the valve. So step 2 is you have to turn off the pump, and then you rotate the valve to backwash, and then you turn the pump back on. Now this says 3 to 5 minutes, but there is a sight glass where you can actually see the dirty water. It'll take about 15 seconds before the dirt gets dislodged from the sand, and that sight glass will turn either opaque, milky, or it'll turn green. And you can watch as that sight glass goes back from green and opaque back to clear, and that's you've successfully cleaned out the sand at that point. Some cartridge sand filters don't have that sight glass, so you usually want to do about a 3-minute backwash to be sure. Okay, once the water's clean, you turn the pump off, rotate the filter valve back to rinse or to rinse, and then you turn the pump on for 20 to 30 seconds just to rinse it out. Then you turn the pump back off, rotate the filter valve to filtration or filter, depending on what it says, turn the pump back on. And then of course you want to renote the pressure, because now you know your clean pressure. You just backwash, the sand is clean, and you want to know what pressure your pool has when it's clean, so that you can judge when it's time to backwash again. And that pressure is based on so many things. It's based on like how many elbows your builder put on your plumbing. It's based on how far you are from the equipment, what horsepower your pump is, how big the sand filter is, you name it. It's different for every pool. Okay, so it's good to note your clean pressure.
Mark, I wanted to put an emphasis on when you roll out that backwash hose. It's like a fire hose, so it's flat when it's deflated. So I wouldn't slide it under a fence or something where it fits.
Good one.
With water in it, because as soon as you start that backwash, it's a lot of pressure, and it's going to inflate, to 2 inches, 3 inches, and really spray. So usually it's good if there's a ravine on your lot, or if you can get it to a storm drain, would be the ideal.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Okay, so clues that how long can you go with a sand filter before you have to change the sand out? Usually it's 5 years, by the way. That the sand usually lasts about 5 years. There are some products out there now. I believe we've put them in on a few clients. One client has these. They look like big cotton balls. And apparently that lasts a lot longer. And there's also now a product from Israel that's made from recycled glass. And apparently that it lasts forever. And you don't have to ever change it. But your sand usually gets completely saturated with like body oils and sunscreen, and it can no longer backwash anymore. And the actual shape of the grains will look more smooth under a microscope, and that's usually the end of the life of that sand. It needs to be replaced. However, you'll find that as you get close to the end of the life cycle of the sand, you're needing to backwash quite frequently. And you have a choice. I mean, you don't have to change the sand. You can be content to backwash twice a week if you have to, and it'll still filter. But if you get frustrated and you miss your backwash interval of 2 weeks, and you like the fact that you only have to deal with it every 2 weeks, you can opt to change the sand. Okay. The recycled glass has, I think it's got almost a 2 times the price premium to it, which is worth it, I would say, considering it's a lifetime product. Apparently, I don't know. We're just practitioners. We don't always know, and some of these new products are very experimental for us, and we'll usually tell you if we have no experience with a product, and we don't. But we did put the recycled glass in a few customers' pools, and they seem to be happy with it. But time will tell if it stands the test of time. Okay, clues that you need to backwash. So the pressure gauge is one clue. It shows obviously high pressure compared to previous readings on that pool. Also, when the sand gets dirty, the water flow gets stymied. It gets stymied, like it doesn't flow as nicely. So you might be in the pool and you might notice that the water flow coming out of the returns is weak. It also could get so weak that the heater stops working, because the heater has in it a device that measures water pressure, because the heater cannot safely turn on unless there's a sufficient amount of water flow to carry the heat away from the heater and heat your pool. So there's a safety in it called a pressure switch. So if the heater stops working, or it says LO on a Hayward heater, or pressure switch open, it could very well mean that you need to backwash. And similarly, a salt system tends to have a flow switch as well. And you may get a no flow light on your salt system if your filter gets very dirty. And in a really, really advanced stage of a dirty filter, the final clue is, I would say, a fist-sized bubble will appear at the top of your pump window, showing like this deadlock, and it just cannot push the water through the filter anymore. So that's a last resort indication, but you should be looking for those 5 indicators. Should be the clues that your filter needs to backwash. But the pressure gauge is the first place I would look. Okay, so now let's talk about cartridge filters. A lot of you with new builds out there probably have them. You're looking at the 3 most common brands. On the left is a Pentair, in the middle is a Hayward, and on the right is a Stay Right. The Stay Right doesn't have a belt. It has these clamps that kind of clamp on, and you can take them apart with your hand. These 2 need a wrench or a socket wrench to dismantle. And what I like about the Pentair one is that it has a spring here, and the spring lets you know that you've tightened the belt enough. When the rungs of the spring are all touching each other, it lets you know that you've tightened this nut enough. That's for most people who don't keep a torque wrench on hand. It's a nice feature to have. And on the Hayward one, there's usually an instruction about what this gap is supposed to be here. But I would say if you've tightened it and your filter's not leaking, then it's probably tight enough. Okay. And they're much simpler. There's only an air relief valve on top of them. So essentially, anytime you open the pump or vacuum the pool, or from time to time, you should probably open the air relief valve and make sure that there's no air inside the cartridge filter. The best way to imagine these is that there's 4 cartridges sitting about yay high inside, and because the pipes are on the lower half of the filter, an air bubble likes to form in this top half. And if you don't let that air bubble out, you're really only getting 50% coverage on your cartridge. So it's a good idea to open the valve on top, and a bunch of air may come out. And as soon as it starts shooting water, close the valve. Okay. If your cartridge filter is inside a shed, maybe have a bucket ready in front of the nozzle so that it doesn't make a mess. But it's a good idea to bleed the air out from time to time, especially when if you've opened the pump, or if the pump got deprimed. That air likes to get trapped in the top half of the filter. Similarly, if you're going to open the filter, you obviously need to stop the pump. Okay, and then you should open the valve, and what that will do is it will allow the water to drop below the belt. The water will want to fall down to this height so that you can actually take the top off. If you don't let the water drop down, the vacuum pressure is so strong that even with the belt off, you won't be able to separate the filter. Okay, so with the pump off, you want to open this valve and let it suck in air. Of course, if you've opened the cartridge to clean it out, of course, there's going to be a ton of air in there when you go to turn on the system. So open that bleeder valve when you go to turn on the system. Okay. And these are, again, the different brands: Pentair, Hayward, Stay Right. This one's Jandy. They all have drain plugs at the bottom. Now, I want you to note that on a lot of these cartridge filters, there's no way to drain the pool. It's a closed system. Unlike with the sand filter, there was a waste mode and a third pipe. So if you're getting a cartridge filter, it might be a good idea to either ask your installer to put in an external valve in the plumbing, so that should you need to drain your pool, you can open that valve and take some water to the street or to a storm sewer. Now, if you have a small submersible pump, you can drain your pool with that too. And you don't need to bother putting in that valve. And this is only in the scenario where you have a cartridge filter and the water level gets too high from the rain. On Pentair, it's a little harder to do it because the drain plug is here. But on Hayward, Stay Right, and Jandy, you can actually plumb a ball valve to instead of the drain plug, because this is 1.5 inches, it's a standard size, and you can put a ball valve here with a ribbed piece of plumbing and put the hose there, so you can use that to drain the pool. Okay.
Now, it should be mentioned that when you wouldn't be able to drain the entire pool if you didn't have a lower suction.
Very good point.
Only drain it to the height of the skimmer, but so it's great for an excess rainfall. But if you want to drain your pool because you're going to paint it or something, then you would need an external pump for that.
Right, and also for you liner guys and fiberglass people, and some concrete people, you really do not want to drain your pool. Okay, I want you to always remember that the water inside of your liner pool is what's retaining your liner against the walls of the pool. If you relieve that water, if you drop the water level too low, the liner will start coming off of the walls and it may never go back the same way. So it is a very bad idea to drain a pool. And with fiberglass, the water inside the fiberglass pool is actually part of potentially what's holding the pool in the ground, because you have to imagine there might be water underneath that fiberglass in the ground, like the water table of the area, and that is putting a great deal of pressure underneath the pool, trying to force the pool up out of the ground. And the only thing stopping that pool from rising up out of the ground is the weight of the water in the pool. Same thing with concrete. It can crack the concrete pool as well. So draining a pool is probably something you want to reserve for a pool professional, unless you really know what you're doing. Sean, great chime in. He wants to let everybody know that between the top and bottom of the filter, there's a big O-ring here. And if that O-ring is not seated properly, the filter will leak. So you want to make sure that O-ring is clean when you put the filter back together and seated correctly. And in many cases, it likes to slip out. So it's a very big O-ring. It's the entire width of the base of the filter. You can't miss it. Another big one, you don't want to use any petroleum-based lubricants when you lubricate anything that's rubber on a pool. Vaseline, anything that's petroleum-based is really bad for the rubber. Anytime you want to put a lubricant on threads or on a rubber, it needs to be Teflon-based, or what's known as PTFE. That's Papa Tango Foxtrot Echo, PTFE lubricant or Teflon lube. Okay, do not use anything petroleum-based. It is not good for pools. Anytime you see an O-ring, if you want to lubricate the O-ring on your pump, you can do that with Teflon-based. But that's a little bit more advanced. I want to get through the basics. These are what the cartridges look like inside of a Hayward filter. There is a piece that sits up here that couples these 4 cartridges together. That's called the top manifold. I chose a picture that doesn't show the top manifold so that you can see the cartridges naked. But the top manifold, you just pull it off. It doesn't thread, but there's some of these Haywards, there's a 5th pipe sticking up high, and the manifold has 5 things you need to plug it into. It just pressure fits, so you can pull it off to take the cartridges out. Chances are, if you've had a cartridge filter for a while, they won't look even this white when you clean them. They should look considerably whiter when you power wash them. You might find, oh, by the way, this is the O-ring that Sean was describing, which is a great tidbit. You might want to clean them yourself. You need a power washer with a little bit of pressure on it. A garden hose, a nozzle alone usually makes the filters worse. It impacts the dirt deeper into the cleats of the filter, and it usually doesn't get the job done. So unless you've immersed the filters in a cleaning solution, which we don't do because that's a long process, So we just come with a power washer, remove your cartridges and power wash them and then put them back. That's the fastest way to deal with the problem. So I recommend.
Sorry, quick question. So I think my filters are they're made from like a cardboardy kind of material. These look plastic. Are these
No,
plastic or cardboard?
it's the same thing. You're seeing the same thing. Your filters probably are just a little older. They're all, I think, cotton or something. I'm not sure what they are. Just be careful with the power washer. If you have a really strong one, don't get too close because you can damage the cleats, but just close enough that that it comes out clean. It should take you about 10 minutes per filter. That's the amount of time you should spend getting these things clean, and do it very systematically if you're doing it yourself.
And how long should a filter last? I know that's probably a tough question, but
It depends on what your builder gave you. There's a big disconnect. A lot of the builders don't know. A lot of pool builders are excellent landscapers and they know how to put a pool in the ground, but they're not very up to date or up to snuff on the equipment. Some of them are. I mean, we know a lot about the equipment. We attend these seminars regularly and read your manuals always. But essentially, a cartridge filter should be sized to the square footage of the pool. If you size it large enough, with new cartridges, the way I would like to size a filter, if I was selling you one, I would like you to be able to not have to clean your cartridges the entire summer. Wow. So it should be clean at your opening. We clean them at the closing, and then we put them back clean. And it should be clean at your opening, and it should last all the way through the summer. And then we clean them again at winterization. Now, you might not want to spend a new set can be anywhere from $300 to $500. So you may not want to spend the money. It's up to you how often you want to clean them. You might make it halfway through the summer, and you might be okay with taking them out and power washing them halfway through the summer and putting them back. That's it's up to you. As they get older, they will get dirtier faster, and they won't come out as clean, and you'll need to replace them.
So I guess instead of that question and sort of how frequently do we replace them, how do we know when it's time to replace them?
You have to decide. You really prefer not to take your cartridges out every 2 weeks or something and power wash them. And you'll know it's the same clues that you need a backwash that the cartridges require cleaning. Okay. I'll repeat those clues in a minute. Okay, so again, if you're okay with it, if you say to yourself, I really don't want to do this at all, you may opt to buy new cartridges the second your cartridges don't make it through the summer. That might be you. If you have a regular service company, we charge a half an hour labor, sometimes 45, depending on the filter, to come and clean the cartridges for you. And you just might very well lump that charge. I don't know. It depends on what you want to do. But there's always, like I say, there's many ways to skin a cat. There's always options. Okay, so the clues that the cartridge requires cleaning. Again, the pressure gauge shows obviously high pressure compared to previous readings. Water flow coming from the returns is weak, and you'll know your pool over time. The heater indicates no pressure or pressure switch open or a similar error code. The salt system indicates no flow. And of course, again, in a very advanced stage where those cartridges are really, really dirty and you've created a deadlock situation, there's a very big stable air bubble that forms at the top of the pump sight glass window. And you can really see that the water is standing still. So any questions about cartridge filters?
Yeah, quick question. On the previous slide, there was, and in my filter, I've got this fiberglass rod with kind of like a little filtery thing on the top. Mm-hmm. So at the bottom there's like a fiberglass rod with like a little, I don't know what you want to call it. Yeah, exactly. What is that?
That is to allow air from the bottom to reach the top when you're bleeding the filter. So it's probably a good idea to clean that. But you can just rub your hand on it. It's just a little screen.
Okay, thank you.
That you can clean with your garden hose. If you want. And that straw does come out. Just make sure you put it back in its hole where it came from. And sometimes that little straw is built onto the top manifold. So it depends on what brand of filter you have. But yeah, you might want to just clean it out. And there might be debris at the bottom of the filter too. You can either shop vac it out, or you can open the drain plug and flush it out if you want.
I just wanted to talk about the filters. comparing the sand and cartridge, because the most common question is, what's the cost benefit for each, and how do they compare? So you just heard Mark say that the sand in a sand filter is going to last 5-6 years, and let's call it a $400 job, $400 to $500 job of replacing that sand. Now you have a cartridge filter, and let's say commonly they only last, let's say 3 to 4 years, and they're about $100 each. So there's $400 in a cartridge filter. So there's the comparison. Now, if you have a sand filter, you're also losing, an inch of water with the chemicals in it each week when you do a backwash. So you want to find the one that's right for you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. So after the filter, we talked about heaters. These are the 3 most common ones you'll likely see. There's another dandy one that's not depicted here. This is pretty common, the Hayward H series. This is also very common, the Raypak. Raypak and Rheem look exactly the same. They're the same company. And then you have the Pentair Master Temp as well. Again, Pentair is usually beige. The basic concept of a heater, the easiest way to think of a heater is this. In your mind, imagine a barbecue, and above the grill, imagine a snake of copper pipes that the pool water flows through. And the barbecue basically barbecues those copper pipes, heating them up. And the water has to pass through that labyrinth of copper piping and absorb all the heat from the flames, and that heat is carried back to the pool. Okay, to intensify the barbecue, there could be a blower motor underneath blowing the intense flames against the copper pipes. In fact, I made my own picture, a heater here. So you can see this is the burner, and then you've got the depiction here is the heat exchanger. So you've got the cold water coming in, and it's being subjected to the heat, and it comes out. But as you can see, there's a distinct disconnection between the part where the flames are and the part where the water is. Okay, if water leaks out of that snake to the flame area, you may see a great deal of steam coming out of the heater, or you might see water leaking under the heater. Unfortunately, in those scenarios, the heat exchanger is one of the most expensive parts of the heater, and it's rarely cost effective to simply change the heat exchanger. A lot of people were doing it last year because of COVID. There's been a great shortage of heaters with the amount of pool construction that's been going on, so they had no choice. But for a couple $100 more, usually you can replace the entire heater. But essentially, the best way to understand it is like a furnace heating air, except this is heating the water. Okay, now the heater itself doesn't control the heat. What it actually controls is how long the flames stay on for. So the flames are either on 100% or they're off. The heater regulates the temperature by choosing how long to keep those flames on, just like a simple furnace. So you have a thermostat, and it measures the temperature of the water coming into the heater. Why the water coming in? Because the water coming out of the heater is even hotter than the pool, because it's superheated by the heater. When it goes and mixes with the pool and then comes back to the heater, that's the current temperature of the pool. So there's a temperature probe on the intake of the heater, and you set on your thermostat, let's say you set 80 degrees Fahrenheit, until that heater senses 80-degree water coming back, those flames will stay on. And in some cases, if you have a really high efficiency heater, when the heater's running, you'll feel warm water coming out of the jet, sometimes even hot water. And that hot water is actually much hotter than your temperature setting, but it's mixing with the pool to get the pool to a certain temperature. And then once the heater senses that temperature, the flames discontinue. Okay, pretty simple if you know how a furnace works or any other type of boiler. Any questions about heaters? there's not really much to know other than how it quickly works. I didn't want to touch too much upon it because it doesn't really, if you have problems with your heater, you're probably needing an HVAC professional or a pool guy there. So the last thing in the pool circuit, so we talked about, again, just to recap, we talked about the skimmer. From the skimmer, water goes to the pump. From the pump, you have a secondary basket in the pump to capture any particles that made it past the skimmer basket. After that, the water goes into some kind of filtration device. And now that the water's been filtered, it's ready to go through a heater. Okay. And then after the water's been heated, now you have to, the last stop the water will usually take before it returns back to the pool is a chlorinator. Some pools don't have any chlorinator at all, and they chlorinate by putting pucks in the skimmer, which has some disadvantages and advantages of simplicity. If you have a saltwater pool, or you have a canister chlorinator, you will find, or you should correctly find, the chlorinator after the heater. I have seen professional pool builders put this salt cell on this side of the heater. And that is a big no-no, because you are now sending concentrated chlorinated water into the copper heat exchanger of the heater. And chlorine is highly corrosive, and we're going to talk about that more. But in a correct build, you should have the salt cell plumbed after the heater. Okay, it should be the last stop the water makes in the pool circuit before it returns to the pool. Okay, and also it's probably a good idea, and most builders don't know this, but there should be a one-way valve between the salt cell and the heater, so that when you do stop the pump, the concentrated chlorine gas that's produced in the salt cell cannot migrate backwards into the heater and cause damage to the heat exchanger. Okay, a lot of builders, they simply don't know that nuance. They're not attending the equipment seminars offered by the manufacturers. So it is something you can retrofit on after the fact. I know I have at least one client here where we've done that. Okay, and now we're going to talk about salt systems. This is another depiction of the daisy chain of sequence, and this order is pretty much standard for all pools. You got the pump, the filter, the heater, then the salt system. And on the Hayward salt system, you've got a little device as well. That's the flow sensor. So like I said, the heater inside has a pressure switch to make sure that there's an adequate amount of water flow. And the salt system has a similar device. It doesn't work on pressure. It measures water flow. And if the salt system doesn't read an ample amount of water flow, it will not produce chlorine. And yeah, you heard me correctly. I can't tell you how many times I take a phone call where people tell me my pool has no chlorine in it. It's a saltwater pool. That is a big misconception. A saltwater pool is very much a chlorine pool. And without going too deep into the chemistry of how it works, essentially using electricity, you can turn salt water into chlorine gas. That's really what it is. The process is called electrolysis. If you have any type of science background, you might even be able to explain this better than I can. But for all intents and purposes, when you take an electrical charge and pass it through salted water, salt in chemistry is NaCl, or sodium chloride. That electricity causes a chemical reaction, making chlorine gas. And yes, chlorine is, in its purest form, it's a gas. It's not a liquid. Despite the fact that in our minds we imagine it as a liquid, it is very much a gas. Okay. If you have a regular chlorinator on your pool, you usually just have a canister, and you can fill it with a solid chlorine product, and then there's a dial on there to regulate the amount of chlorine flow back to the pool. Okay, with a salt system, that chlorine flow is adjusted electronically. Okay, any questions about this process here? The salt system is probably the most complicated part of this lecture. So the Hayward salt system typically looks like this. The Jandy one like this. There's also a Jandy True Clear, which is a little more a newer one. It's a slightly different version of this. The Pentair one has the controls on the cell itself. This is the old Zodiac clear water, and even more rare is the Jacuzzi Carvin version. It's really just a knockoff of Hayward, but they all have their own slightly different way of controlling them. And then there's the Jandy makes one that has a mineral cartridge in it as well. It's called the Duo Clear or the Fusion Soft. And it looks like this. It has one port for the cell and another port for a mineral cartridge that gets changed yearly.
Hey, so
Okay,
Mark,
they
how
will-
long does how long does the salt cell typically live for?
They can go, depends. They're starting to create what they call extended life ones. They do burn out like a light bulb eventually. I would say on the high side, they can last 5 years, and I've seen them go in 3 years. Again, it depends on how well they're maintained. Okay, they need to be cleaned. We clean them at the opening using. They need to be cleaned with acid and water because they calcify. But if you don't clean them and you don't take care of them, they can go quicker. And if you buy the extended life ones, they tend to last longer, or at least the warranty on them is longer. And if you buy the regular ones, the price is lower, but I think they're only good for about, or guaranteed for a year or two. So it depends.
I think my Jandy one died last year. What would the typical replacement cost be?
I would have to see the model. I don't want to talk numbers too much in this presentation. If you want, I mean,
Okay.
you can reach out to us after. But
Sure.
my main goal here is to just give a free education. Let's save your question. I'll definitely find out for you and quote it. But right now, I want to just educate, if that's okay with everyone.
Thank you.
So adjusting the salt system. Okay, so there is a chlorine control on the salt system. So you will need to you'll need to get the water to a certain salt level. Okay, and that salt level will usually be shown on the screen of the salt system. It depends which brand you have. Some salt systems don't have anything except an LED that just says add salt. And some salt systems actually have a 4-digit parts per million number that shows on the screen. On Hayward salt systems, the regular ones, the salt needs to be 3,200 parts per million, or as close to it as possible. And there's Hayward makes a low salt version as well. That number needs to be maintained. And it shouldn't fluctuate too much once you get it into range, unless you have a severe thunderstorm, or if your pool has a leak and you're constantly adding fresh water and you're diluting that level. But never fall into the trap of believing that more salt in the pool will make more chlorine. That's a very big misconception and a big no-no. The salt is a fixed number, or a fixed range, I should say, and the chlorine is controlled by an electronic knob or buttons, dialing the percentage output up and down. Okay, so salt systems, they're not, I guess the word I want to use is thermostatic. They don't actually regulate the chlorine in the water. They actually have no idea how much chlorine there is in the water. You have to test the water using some kind of external test, whether it be test strips or a test kit, or taking a sample to your local pool store. And based on that feedback, you adjust the chlorine output up or down accordingly. They do not sense the chlorine level and then adjust themselves. So it's very common for a lot of people that have never been taught how to use a salt system properly. Like, we'll show up to the house and we'll look at the pool and we'll see like the liner, and there's no print left below the water line. The liner is totally white, and the customer, like, I guess maybe the builder misinformed them and said, oh yeah, I've got a saltwater pool, I don't have to do anything. And of course they don't know that their pool has way too much chlorine in it. and they never care because they're not sensitive to the high level of chlorine, and they always see clear water because water with lots of chlorine in it will be clear and look good, but it's destroying the liner and the pool. So we can get into chemistry after. I'm happy to continue the runtime on the presentation and talk chemistry after, but I wanted to make this more about the basic operation of the pool. So they don't self-regulate like a thermostat. They have an adjustment knob, or they have buttons on them that can dial the chlorine output percentage through 0 and 100% output. And even the percentage is arbitrary. So it's different for every pool. It's different for every month, because chlorine gas is susceptible to different temperatures. It's different for how much sunlight your backyard sees, and it's dynamic. You may have to have a certain percentage set in March, or in April rather, and a completely different one in July. So the key here is keep testing your water and keep adjusting the output. A good rule of thumb is to assume that the chlorine level in the water shares a linear relationship to the percentage output, but not always. When you're fine adjusting, it's more or less a linear relationship. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Most pools should have between 1 and 3 parts per million of chlorine in the water. Pentair likes to say 2 and 4. Pretty much anything under 5 ppm is safe. Even 10 ppm, you can swim. Public pools have much higher chlorine than private pools, but pretty much anything under 10 ppm is safe for most people who don't have sensitive skin. We like to try as service technicians to pinpoint almost 3 or 4 ppm when we get your pool serviced. Mainly because if we keep it at the higher end of the range, you're less likely to call us and say, my pool turned green after a thunderstorm. We want to keep an ample amount of chlorine to allow your pool to be resilient and handle an array of bather loads and things like that. You might opt to do the same thing, but anything between 1 and 4 parts per million is probably enough chlorine in the water. So what I mean by the linear relationship is, let's say your chlorine is 1 ppm and you're currently running at 20% output, and you want to achieve, let's say, 2 ppm. So I say that the relationship is more or less linear. You probably want to turn up to 40% output, and that should yield you about double the ppm in the water. It's a general loose rule, but it's more of a trial and error and an arbitrary adjustment. So I would usually start around 30% and adjust up or down from there. Okay. I really dislike showing up to people's houses and seeing that they have the dial turned up to 100%. You're really just destroying your pool and quite quickly. And then of course you don't correlate your heater being destroyed like 5 years later to the fact that, 5 years ago, your chlorine was severely mismanaged. It causes the damage is always latent, right? Okay, that's probably one of the more complicated concepts here. Does anyone have any questions about the salt system? Johnny, do you have anything you want to add?
I can add something in there too. Your salt systems will not generate chlorine if your temperature or your water temperature is below 60 Fahrenheit as well. It won't have the ability to ionize the salt to turn it into chlorine at that point.
Right, the chemical reaction requires a certain temperature. That's right.
How much
which is a good
salt to put in and how?
Pardon me?
Oh, sorry, we have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, please.
So we have a saltwater pool which was installed late last summer,
Okay.
and for some reason I have in my mind that the reading on the panel should be 1500. I don't know
It
why
sounds like you have a Hayward low salt system.
it is a Hayward, and when you said low salt before, but you didn't give a figure, I was waiting for that figure to say, yeah, it should be about this. So they told us to look out for about 1500. And they said, if it's low, all you need to do is literally throw in probably a cup or 2 cups of pool salt and let it circulate through and just watch the reading. Is that in fact true, or should?
Well, if it's a cup or 2 cups, I'm imagining that you have a very tiny pool.
It is. It's 10 by 23.
Okay, so that's not tiny. It's rarely a cup.
Okay.
I would say, okay, here's
Maybe-
what you do. You need to calculate the volume of your pool, and you need to get the manual to your salt system. In the manual, there's a table, and on the table you can cross-reference your current salt reading with the volume of your pool, and
Yes.
it'll tell you how many kilograms of salt to achieve 1,500.
Okay, and I have seen that table, yeah. So it's really quite easy to calculate the volume because it's about 5 feet by 10 feet by 23 feet. So there's your volume.
Right.
in cubic
Make sure
feet.
you average the shallow end and deep end depth in your third
It's one
dimension.
depth. It's a sport pool.
Okay,
So-
okay, so one depth, then you don't need to average the depth. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
length, width. So you do length times width times depth
Depth,
in
yeah,
feet, and then you multiply by 7.5. Take the cubic feet, multiply that by 7.5. That'll put you in US gallons.
right,
And
okay,
then from there, you can multiply by 3.78541178, and that'll convert you to liters. But you
Liters,
can,
right,
but
okay.
you can just use Google to convert the numbers for you. Okay.
Right, so,
And in Canada, it's very helpful to work in liters because all of the chemicals are in grams and in metric.
okay. So based on the volume and based on the reading, it will then say how many kilograms of salt to put in.
Correct.
Okay. And you know what,
However,
maybe that's right.
Okay, so not to seem stupid, just following up on that.
yeah,
So with that automatic salt reader on the panel,
yes.
why are we testing the water? That's the part I don't understand.
Okay, because there is 6 or 7 other dimensions of chemistry that you also want to check. It just happens that you have one piece of equipment that will tell you your salt level, but the salt level is only one part of the puzzle. You need to know chlorine, you need to know pH, you need to know alkalinity, all those things. You don't have built-in equipment into your pool that tests those things. So you need to test your water regularly. I think maybe there's going to be a lot of chemistry questions at the end. So I think if you guys want to stay up, I'll talk to you about chemistry as well.
Okay.
So I got a quick question around salt. So I've been told it's the best practice at the start of every season just to dump in a bag of salt. Is that what typically people do?
Well, okay. So when we winterize a swimming pool, we have to lower the water below your jets, okay? Because we have to blow out all the water out of your jets. And then it depends on what cover you have, but afterwards, when we arrive in the spring to open your pool, if you have a tarp, you need to replenish all that water using your garden hose, about a foot. And then if you have a safety cover, all the rain and snow passes through it and refills up your pool for you. Either way, every year you're diluting the salt level down to winterize the pool. So you need to then top up the salt to get it back into range once the water level has been refilled.
And to your earlier comment when you were talking about that one big storm comes and the pool can turn green, I've noticed over the past 2 or 3 years, especially here in Vaughan, that we've had a tremendous amount of rain. So it's been a real tough time trying to keep on top of all the chemicals, but I'm sure you'll get to that at the end. But the chemical balance seems to be whacked off, very frequently depending on how much it's raining.
Right. Okay. Well, this presentation doesn't cover chemistry, but I'm gonna stay with you as long as you want. I'm here as your ambassador to this information. So if you want to talk chemistry after, I will teach you everything I can. Okay. But right now I need to make sure everyone understands that salt systems have to have a set range of salt in the pool. I was going to say another way that you might, once you get comfortable with your pool, you might want to throw in, if your salt level is low, you throw in a bag of salt that's 20 kilograms, and take note, how many ppms did your salt system go up based on that one bag? And then you can just keep that range in your mind. It's usually about 200 to 400 ppm based on the size of the pool per bag. Okay, somewhere in there. Between there's a 12 by 24, a 16 by 32, and a 20 by 40. So that range applies somewhere in there, 200 to about 400 ppm per 20 kilogram bag. And if your pool is really small, you can try half bags at a time. You can do You can do 10 kilograms and see what happens.
Sure.
Okay.
And for those of us that are topping up our pool with chlorine or putting pucks in or shocking it or whatever, is it accurate that chlorine is most effective when you put it in at night? Because if you put it in the morning throughout the daytime, it can sort of kill and negatively impact the chlorine's concentration.
Yes. Okay. So chlorine is like I said, it's a gas, and it's highly unstable, meaning it wants to dissipate very easily under UV and sunlight. It's highly susceptible, which is why we add an additional chemical to the pool called stabilizer, or chlorine stabilizer. The chemical name is cyanuric acid, and that chemical creates a greenhouse effect to hold the chlorine in the water long enough to do its sanitizing job. So to answer your question, you shock at night because you have the best chance of having the least amount of chlorine dissipation because the sun is going down. You shock at sunset, the sun is going down, and you have less UV light dissipating the chlorine.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But if we're servicing the pool, we don't have the luxury always of shocking at night, so we have to shock during the day. But I would, that's a bit of a splitting hairs type of scenario. Okay, you're probably, if you shock the pool well enough, it should be this more or less the same day or night. But technically, from a strict perspective, if you have control over when you shock the pool, yeah, you want to do it in the evening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have a feeling we're going to have some takers for chemistry, so I'll prepare myself to talk about it. But
would you consider having a separate session at a separate time about chemistry? Because it's obviously quite a big subject.
No, I can cover it relatively quickly for you, for all intents and purposes for you, because 90% of the time you're likely just going to take a sample of your water to a local pool store, and they're going to test it for you, and they're going to tell you. You don't have to necessarily understand what each thing is, even though I'll explain it to you. But what's most important is you have to know your ranges, and you have to add the chemicals that put your ranges back in range.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Adjusting the salt system. So measuring the chlorine demand of your pool. So again, every pool will need a different percentage set to it, and it depends on how big the pool is, how big the bather load is, because human bodies using the pool creates more chlorine demand and consumption. The environment, how much dust and pollen there is in the area, also how long you run your pump for. The pump duration, the air and the water temperature, the hotter the water, the more unstable the chlorine is as well. So at this time of the year, if the water's cold, you may need a lower chlorine output percentage. And then as it warms up into July, you slowly have to get that percentage up to meet the demands of longer sunlight and higher pool temperatures. Okay, and depends on what temperature you keep your pool. And of course, rainfall. Anytime you add fresh water to the pool, it dilutes everything. Okay, this is an example of a basic Hayward salt system. And you've got a knob here that has some percentage numbers. You've got a diagnostic button, and you've got 3 modes here, an off, auto, and superchlorinate. Okay, the lights here, here's your no flow light. Okay, here's your inspect cell light. Some of you may encounter a flashing inspect cell light throughout the summer. Just know that if we opened your pool, we cleaned your salt cell at the opening, and it's unlikely that you need to clean it again. So the inspect cell light is not an actual sensor. It's just a timer, kind of like a check engine light in your car. And it comes on every 500 hours. So the way you reset that inspect cell light is just by holding down the diagnostics button for about 10 seconds, and it'll reset that timer. Okay. Now, if you press the number that you see on the screen is the salt level in parts per million. If you have a Jandy system, the measurement is in GPL, which is, I think, gallons per liter, and it's congruent to ppm. You just have to move the decimal over 3 places. So 2900 ppm is 2.9 GPL. Same thing. One is metric and one is the American. Now, if you press the diagnostics button a few times until you see a number here with a P after it, that number is a digital representation of where this knob is pointing. So you can fine adjust between 10 and 20% digitally by going after the number here, the digital number with the P, and you can see the number fluctuate as you move the knob. You've got a power light, a generating light, a superchlorinate light. The no flow light, you'll notice when you turn on your pump, the no flow light will initially start flashing. Okay, that is reading the flow, but just in case the flow is intermittent, the system doesn't commit to telling you that there's flow until it's measured consistent flow for about 20 seconds. So the flashing is that 20-second delay. If it's flashing, it means it's reading the flow. If you have no light there at all, that means it felt consistent flow for 20 seconds. Okay. If the salt level gets too low, you'll get a check salt light. If the salt level is too high, you'll get a high salt light. And yeah, and the switch should be in auto when in order to get the desired output to work. Superchlorinate is a 100% output for 24 hours. And then regardless of where that switch is, whether it's on auto or superchlorinate, after 24 hours, even if you leave the switch in superchlorinate, it reverts back to auto mode and will chlorinate at the desired output setting. Okay, if you want to superchlorinate twice, you have to come back, move the switch to auto, and then move it back to superchlorinate. Okay, this is just a list of each time you press the diagnostic button, what the different numbers mean. I really recommend on any salt system that you have, you read the manual. The manual to your salt system is essentially the chemistry Bible of your pool, okay? The salt system defines almost all of the chemistry for your pool because the chemical reaction that it takes to make chlorine from salt tends to encapsulate all of the other health requirements and safety things to keep your pool in good shape. So look through your salt systems manual to get all your chemistry, and it is slightly different for every salt system and different for the type of pool medium that you have. Johnny, are you in? Oh, okay, you'll have to excuse me. I need to take a break.
Yes, I'm here.
The restroom. So, Johnny, if you want to add anything about salt systems, now would be the time.
Yeah, the most common questions I get is the comparison again from a salt chlorinator to a regular chlorine puck chlorinator. And obviously you're paying a lot more for the system, for the salt system. But at the beginning of the year, you're putting in a couple of bags of salt. If you spill the salt on your pants, it's not going to stain them. You know, the other way is with chlorine. If you're using the big jugs of the liquid chlorine, you don't want to transport that in your car. If it leaks, it's going to eat through everything. It's going to splash up at you. But there are alternatives with the chlorine pucks, chlorinator systems.
Oh, and it's also good to note that you want to wait about 24 hours. So you add a bag of salt to your pool. You probably want to wait about 12 to 24 hours and recheck the salt level at that point, because it takes that long for the salt that you added to the pool to mix with the rest of the pool and produce a homogeneous new salt level. So let's say you add a bag and a parcel of like heavily salted water goes through the system. It might, the system waits for a while before it commits to telling you what the salt level is. That's why this number is referred to as the average salt level. It's the salt level taken over the last like 12 hours consistently. There's also an instant salt level that you can get, which is a snapshot in time. But if you just added a bag of salt to the pool, the instant salt level is not good information, because let's say you poured that bag of salt near the skimmer and a heavily salted parcel of water goes into the pool, it may read as very high until the pool has a chance to mix this and dissolve all the salt. Okay, so here's the AquaPure. It's got an up and down button to control the percentage output rather than a knob. And it looks like this. Oh yeah, here you go. An up and down, and then you press this button to get the salt level. And I think you press these two buttons together to superchlorinate. This one usually reads in GPL, not ppm. Then you've got the Pentair system, and the controls are located on the cell itself. So there's a little window that you slide out of the way, and there's a more and less button on it. This one does not tell you the salt level. It just has a light on it that says add salt if the salt level is low. Okay, a little more reason to check your local pool store. But it does have an up and down output, and there are two scales, as you can see here. So you see there's 2%, 4%, 6, 8, and 10. And then there's 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100. So if you are running on lower scale, that's considered low output mode, these lights will be flashing. So if you dial up, this light will be on flashing, this light will be flashing, this light, and then you'll keep going 8%, 10%. And if you press more at this point, it'll go back to this light, but the light will be solid. That's indicating you're on 20%. And then you can't, on this model, you cannot adjust anywhere in between 20 and 40. You either got to use 20 or 40. So you go up in increments of 20 at that point. Okay. But if this is connected to a control system made by Pentair, you can fine adjust it. General notes about salt systems. Water must be a minimum of 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I say 70. Some salt systems call for a minimum of 60, 65, and 70. I say 70 to cover all the systems. So, and it's plus or minus 5 degrees. And that is in order for the system to make chlorine. Now, it's good to note a good question about when should you open your pool. Just be advised, if your pool is salt water, and you're not planning on manually adding chlorine to the pool, you need to probably make a commitment to keeping the heater at least 65 degrees. And that can be expensive on some colder April and early May nights. So you may factor that into your decision about what date to open the pool. But there's some alternatives, even if you are salt water and you don't want to use your heater at that point. So again, the chemical reaction where chlorine gas is made from salt water requires warm water, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. On Hayward systems, if the water is really cold, instead of telling you the salt level on the screen, just it'll just say COLD on the screen, and that's how you know. It won't even turn on. It'll just say cold until you get the temperature up. Customers with saltwater pools should be advised not to turn their heaters below 70 Fahrenheit, as the salt system requires this minimum temperature. But the good news is, in the heat of the summer, most of your pools will stay much hotter than 70 degrees, even without the heater on. So that's just a function of how hot the days are. And so if you do go on vacation and you're leaving your salt pool alone for a bit, you probably want to not turn your heater off. You just want to set it to 70 degrees. And mostly it'll stay, it probably won't turn on. And if it does turn on, it's very minimal just to keep the pool at 70 degrees.
So
Now, go ahead.
Quick question on that note. So what temperature do most people leave their pools, saltwater pools on throughout the whole summer? Is it 70?
No, well, I mean, that is very much a personal preference. I mean, on my pool, I used to keep it at 85. Some people like 90, for the love of God. And some people like a very refreshing swim, and they'll put it to maybe 75, 70. It depends. It depends on how hot it is outside and what you want.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And it is weird. I know that everything else is done in metric, but we always talk pool temperatures in Fahrenheit. Okay, so now if you do want to turn off your heater or set it below 70 and the water is very cold, you can just chlorinate your pool the old-fashioned way. Even though you have a salt system, there's nothing wrong with adding chlorine to the pool. Chlorine is chlorine, whether you add it manually from pucks or liquids, or you make it from the salted water. It's the same. Okay, so if you have a plan to manually chlorinate your pool, you can keep your heater off, and you have to kind of calculate the cost effectiveness of what you're going to do. Okay. So Okay, we're going to talk now again about the main drain. So I can't remember which gentleman it was who asked what a main drain is. It's not every pool has this. It's this device here in the deep end. Okay, so many pools do not have a main drain, especially the fiberglass guys. The older codes allowed for a single main drain at the bottom, but a new build today requires that there's two of them, and they have to be plumbed in tandem, and they need to be, I think, either 3 meters or 3 feet apart. So if your liner is being changed, and you only have the one, most of the liner guys have to remove your main drain altogether. So when the liner comes off, they usually fill this area with concrete, and your new liner will be perfectly continuous in this section, and you will no longer have a main drain because it's no longer to code. Okay, you don't need one. It's nice to have, but you don't need one. So again, we talked about that equalizer at the beginning, but there's 2 ways to have a main drain. This is the equalizer setup where the main drain is plumbed to the hole in the skimmer that's closest to the pool. And if you get debris in your basket, the upper part of the skimmer gets choked, and the suction will then start taking from the bottom of the pool. Okay, but then you have, that's this equalizer setup I showed you before, right? So this red clump picks the debris. The water then, instead of being able to get sucked this way, will start to suck from here and do a little U-turn here and still go to the pump. Okay, here's an actual image of the bottom of a skimmer with 2 holes. This one, let's say the pool is on this side, this one would be the drain, and this one would be the pump suction. Okay. And then you can have the main drain where it's plumbed directly to the pump. And then on the suction side of your pump, you can either have a 3-way valve that can choose where you want to draw the water from, the skimmer, the main drain, or both simultaneously. Okay. Here's what it looks like in real time. So this 3-way valve, you see you've got one pipe here coming from the skimmer and one pipe here coming from the main drain. And this valve can choose between the 2. You may also have 2 ball valves set up like this in a manifold. You can turn skimmer on and main drain on, or both on. Just be careful not to close. In this case, there's no safeguard. Don't ever close both of them. Otherwise, you've blocked all suction to the pump, right? And of course, when you're vacuuming, if you want maximum suction through your vac hose, you obviously want to turn off your main drain, right? So that you get all the suction going through the skimmer. Using the main drain is good for mixing salt, by the way. So it's always good to take the water from the bottom of the pool for the sake of mixing. So it's nice to have a main drain for that purpose, but you can also just hook up your vacuum and then you have a low suction point, and that acts similar to a main drain as well.
So Mark, quick question. 2 slides prior, you had, sorry, the one prior to this. To the right, sorry, and again, to the right of the skimmer, there we go. So to the right of the skimmer, there's another tube there. There we go. What is that?
That's the return. That's just the return. It's not relevant to what I'm describing now. That's just the jet, the wall of the pool.
Okay. Sorry,
Return.
I got one of those, but I don't really know because it seems to have like a one-way, basically return.
No, you've got water being sucked from here to the pump. Then going in this depiction, you just have a pump and a filter, and then it goes back to the pool.
Okay.
And then here's the skimmer going to the pump, through the filter, and then back to the pool. Okay.
Okay.
And like again, there's like it depends on the builder's preference and whatnot, but there's a general note about all valves is that when the handle on all valves, whether it be gas, water, or whatever, when the handle is parallel to the pipe, that indicates that the valve is open. Whenever a handle is perpendicular to a pipe, that means it is closed. So in these pictures here, you are looking at 3 valves that are open. Okay, it's a gas valve. This is a water valve. Some gas valves look like this, and this is a pool ball valve. Okay, now I don't know. I can see. Oh, there's Jess Zeidman here. There's a few people with pools that have spillover spas. So I have to include it in the presentation because it's very important to understand how it works if you do have one. Some pools have connected to them a hot tub that is part of the pool, and it perpetually overfills until it spills over into the pool. Okay. We're going to describe how that system looks and works. So as you can see here, and based on the old picture that I've shown, you have an additional vessel of water that overflows into the pool. Okay, and there's two modes in this case. There's pool mode and there's spa mode. When the pool is in pool mode, the spa simply has another return on it that's the same as the pool return, and it just fills with the return water until it overflows into the pool. So the spa water and the pool water in pool mode is the same body of water. Okay, it's just a bucket, a vessel that is part of the pool that's filling up perpetually with the water from the pool. So whatever temperature the heater is set to, the pool and the spa will be the same temperature. Okay, and then there's usually two valves on a pool with a spillover spa, and I will show you how they work. When you're in pool mode, you can see this pipe here, the spa suction is completely shut off. No suction is being applied to the spa. The water still leaves the pool via the skimmer, goes to the pump, goes to the filter, goes to the heater, goes to the salt system. And then after that, some of the water goes back to the pool and some of the water continuously fills up this spa until it spills over into the pool. So you can see that this cycle is continuous, right? And it creates a circuit. And when you're in pool mode, all of the water is the same. The chemistry properties are the same. The temperature is the same. Everything is the same. And you have one heater, one pump, and one filter. In fact, the spillover spa probably has a secondary pump that operates the massage, but that's a little further down in the next slide. So when you're in pool mode, you've got water, again, leaving the skimmer, pump, filter, heater, salt system, back to the pool and back to the spa perpetually. And the spa will continuously overflow into the pool. Now, when you want to use the hot tub, you will move this valve and this valve such that the following occurs. You will shut off the skimmer and redivert the suction from the spa only. Okay, so the water will be taken from the spa, it'll go to the pump, to the filter, to the heater, through the salt cell, and then only back to the spa. So the pool effect becomes a dead body of water. It is completely, no water is leaving the pool at this point, and no water is coming back to the pool at this point. You have basically replumbed your pool only to operate on the spa. Okay, and now you may turn up your heater to a spa temperature like 100, and only the spa will heat up and the pool will remain waiting for you to put the entire system back in pool mode. Okay, and that requires two valves. You need to move a suction side valve and a return side valve to put the pool in spa mode. And some of you with this setup have control systems where you simply have to press a button between pool and spa mode, and there are electronic actuators that move these valves correctly. Okay, and you don't have to know much other than that you press a button for this. Some of you don't have those control systems, and you have to know how to move those valves to correctly put the pool in spa mode. Okay, and this is what the cycle obviously looks like. It leaves the spa, gets pumped, filtered, heated. It shouldn't actually be chlorinated in spa mode because the spa is too small for the salt cell. The salt cell should actually be only on the pool side, but for this depiction, essentially the pool circuit is only acting on the spa at this point, and the spillover will stop because you are now taking exactly the same amount of water that you're returning. And until you put it back in pool mode, the spa won't spill over. So the spa usually has one jet that's part of the main filtration system of the pool, and that one jet is the one that is filling up the entire spa perpetually. And there's usually a spout on the spa that spills over into the pool. Okay, the remaining jets don't do anything other than provide a massage for your back. Okay, and there's another pump usually that sucks the water from the bottom drains. 2 of these drains are for the filtration system, and 2 of them are for the massage pump. Okay, the suction for the filtration system is usually like these 2, or this, let's say this one and this one, because they have to be a certain distance apart. And then you have 2 other suctions that provide water to another pump that simply takes water from here and blows it out all, in this case, 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 jets at your back. Okay. And it literally, that other pump is just there it is. So this is a depiction of your filtration system on the left. You've got your, this pool has 2 skimmers, and it also has a drain. It also has the spa suction. So these valves can control, you know, where you want to suck from: skimmer A, skimmer B, pool drain, spa drain. Goes to the filter, goes to the heater, goes back to the pool, and then you have a spa return and a pool return. And then, so this takes care of that one jet that filters the spa. And then this one over here simply sucks water from the bottom of the spa and blows it out the massage jets. It's just for a massage. It doesn't heat the water. It doesn't filter the water. It does have the pump does have a basket in it, but because this is only used like temporarily for the moment that you're using the spa, this basket rarely gets dirty and needs to be cleaned. Okay, and the pump may very well look identical to the filtration pump. It just has less plumbing connected to it. Okay, some of your pools may have automatic pool fillers. Okay, I know that at least one of my friends just built a pool, and I know that his lifestyle is busy. So I recommended to him that he ask his builder to include an automatic pool filler. So the way you normally add water to your pool, the pool, as I showed you in the circuit, it's a closed system. There's really no connection between the plumbing of your house and the pool. They have nothing to do with each other. The pool has its own closed system, and if you need to add water to the pool, you've got to take out your garden hose and fill up the pool. But you can also build your pool with a device called an automatic pool filler. And it essentially turns your pool into like the upper tank of a toilet. I don't know if you've ever seen how the upper tank in a toilet works, but there's a float mechanism. And when the tank of the toilet fills up with fresh water, the float reaches its high point and the water stops. So that exact mechanism. In fact, this mechanism right here is the exact same device you would find in most toilets. This black part here is a float, and when this black part gets pushed up by the water level, it stops filling the pool. And the automatic filler is simply a reservoir that is placed in the ground and has a port connecting it to the pool. And if you know, in this picture, the water level inside the automatic filler well is the same level as the water in the pool. They equalize with each other. And then this float mechanism when it falls down, it opens up the house water supply to the pool and fills the pool up. And when the water level gets high enough, it pushes this float mechanism up and stops the flow of water. Okay, pretty straightforward. I mean, I don't want to get too much into this. I don't even know if anyone here has auto fillers, but I wanted to touch on it. Does anyone have any questions about this? No. Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I made a slide with a better view. Yeah, so this is just, so in this case, you do have a house water supply to the float valve, and usually the builder will have a pipe coming up out of the ground right near your garden hose. And there'll be a T-fitting screwed onto your garden hose spigot so that you can connect your automatic filler to it and then still have another output to connect your garden hose to use for whatever garden hose purposes in your backyard. The water line is the same. Okay, auto fillers connect, yeah, like this T-fitting right here. You see, so one of them may lead to your auto filler and the other one is so that you can still use your garden hose. Okay. Oh, there's a video. Since we're running a little longer, I don't want to touch too much on these control systems. because really all they are is a bunch of relays that allow you to control your pool equipment. If you have one of these control systems, it is also your saltwater control system as well. The cell will plug into this instead of that other computer that I showed you. Some people have this Hayward Pro logic. New pools now are being built with the Omni logic, which has a touch screen. A lot of these systems now bridge your pool to the internet so that you can download an app on your phone and control your pool's temperature from the phone, turn on the pool lights from your phone, control your pump speed from the phone, see your pool salt level from your phone. So a lot of these systems, and also if you have a spillover spa, it allows for one-touch changeover between pool and spa mode. Okay, these are a little more fancy schmancy, but they also double as your breaker panel for the pool. The lower half you can see here is you can put all your pool breakers for your pump and all that built right into the system. Okay. I don't want to go too far on this. I don't know if this YouTube video works. A lot of this presentation is made from the presentation we actually use for our new recruits and our technicians. So, again, if you have one of these systems and you want to know how to use it, the best thing you could do is take out the manual. If you have this, it'll be the Bible for your chemistry. It'll be the Bible for how to control the pool. And I would be redundant just regurgitating all that information, but I'm happy to do it. I just don't want to keep you here until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Okay. Yeah, these are all the different systems. These are what the electronic valve actuators look like. So they sit on top of those three-way valves, and they connect to one of those control systems, and the valve can move for you just on the touch of a button instead of you manually moving the valve. Okay, on the left is the Hayward brand, on the right is the Jandy brand. There's also a manual switch on those valves to toggle between one setting and the other in case you need to manually move that valve. Okay, so as you can see, again, in pool and spa mode, you would have an electronic actuator here, another one here, and it would divert the water appropriately to cycle between pool and spa mode. Okay, this section is really important. If you have a fiberglass pool, or actually, in fact, for all pools, it's very important. When some of these pools are being built, the builder will start digging and he will encounter groundwater. Okay, and that could mean that your pool, your backyard, the elevation of your backyard is maybe low in altitude. And I mean, if you look at Toronto has a pretty high water table. In fact, most of let's say the Allen and Eglinton area historically those are all dried up riverbeds if you look at a historical map, which is why a lot of those houses in those areas that are sitting on those historical riverbeds tend to have sump pumps in their basement, and those houses tend to flood. So the same thing goes with pools. If your backyard is low, you may have a water buildup in the ground. Okay, it's very common. So they build a French drain around your pool, and it has to be done with fiberglass pools. Whether you have this water problem or not, the builders are all instructed that they have to put them in because it's particularly dangerous with a fiberglass pool. So a French drain is just another way of saying a weeping tile. I think the original creator of it his last name was French, so they named it after him. So you would have your pool gravel around the pool would be graded to a certain location, and that grading would culminate at a well, and you would be able to open that well and actually see the water level that's in the ground surrounding your pool. It's very important, especially with fiberglass, that if the water level in that well is higher than the water level in your pool, you got to get in there and pump that water out of that well away from the pool, because what that's indicating is that there's more pressure pushing the pool up and pushing on the pool than there is water in the pool holding the pool down in the ground. So with fiberglass, if here, in fact, I'm gonna show you what this looks like. Some of you might notice that on your property, you have like a secondary lid. It looks like a skimmer lid even. And then if you open it, it just leads to a big hole in the ground. And for many of you, it's always dry and it's never a problem. But for some of you, there's always water in there. So that water represents the water that's in the ground, under your pool and around the outside of your pool, okay? So it's really critical, and we can't, as pool technicians, we can't really take care of this for you because sometimes leaving a pump in there can take 4 hours for you to get all that water away from the pool after a heavy rain. So it's not something that we can manage for you. So it's something that you as a pool owner need to keep an eye on. And you need to own a small, either utility pump or sump pump that you can drop down into that well and pump the water away from that pool, okay? If you have a liner pool, the water will ingress behind the liner and the liner will start to come off the wall and blister. I'm sure many of you have even seen some of this happen before. So it's important to manage that problem, okay? This is the builder usually will take the top of a skimmer just to finish off the well so that it looks nice. If you have stonework, you might cut a piece of stone and make another lid for you out of stonework. And this is sump pump with a float switch that you can lower into that well and pump the water away. This is a fiberglass pool, and this is what could happen if you don't keep an eye on that well. Okay, this is a real picture of a fiberglass pool that was turned basically into a boat and totally raised up out of the ground from what's called hydrostatic pressure. That is to say, pressure pushing the pool from underneath. And this is what could happen with your liner. Okay, essentially the water that's in the pool is what's holding the liner against the walls of the pool. It's kind of like blowing up a balloon inside of a jar. So if water gets behind your liner, it tends to make the liner blister like this, and it can come right off the wall. Okay, and with a concrete pool, that pressure can crack the concrete as well. Any questions about the French drain, if you have one? Okay, I hope everyone is still awake. I know this is not a short informational, but okay, how to vacuum a pool. Maybe that'll wake a lot of you up. This is something that you all need to know how to do if you take care of the pool yourself. You will need, of course, a pole. You'll need a vacuum head. You'll need a hose, and you can use a vac plate if you like. You don't have to, it is optional. So you obviously connect the pole to the pole connector on the head, and then one end of the hose will go to the vac head. Usually one of these ends swivels and the other one doesn't. You would connect the swiveling end to the vac head. And then the other end, you would either plug directly into the suction hole of the skimmer, or you would hook up to this vac plate, which goes over your skimmer basket. It's very important when you're, before you connect your vacuum, to reach down into the pool and place the vacuum hose against one of the pool returns. You want to fill that hose up with water before you connect it. Otherwise, when you go to connect it, if it doesn't have water in it, you're going to suck a bunch of air into the pump, and that will deprime the pump, which is not a desirable thing. So you just simply take the hose end and hold it up against one of your pool returns, and you can fill the hose that way. If you don't like leaning over the pool, you can just fill it with your garden hose. Some people just like sinking the hose, but we like to basically hold it against a return. Now you have two choices. You can hook up the vacuum hose directly to the suction hole, or you can use a vacuum plate, okay? And I will talk about the differences between the two setups and the implications of doing it that way. So if you use a vac plate, everything that you vacuum up will end up inside of your skimmer basket over here, because the vac plate, I think this, yeah, see the vac plate comes in like this, and this is your vac hose. So this is in your pool connected to your vacuum, and everything that you vacuum up will end up inside of your skimmer basket. Okay, but if you don't want to use the vac plate, you can take the end of the vac hose, take out the basket, and just shove the hose end right into this hole here, and that will also work. But just note that you are now vacuuming debris into your pump basket at that point. So so just note that if there's a lot of debris at the bottom of the pool, it's all going to end up in your pump basket.
Not only that, you're pumping it into your 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches of plumbing.
Yeah.
So
Blockages.
say you drop gravel into your pool and you're sucking it up, it's advisable to use the basket only, or it could lodge in your plumbing, which is a big job to.
Or heavy debris like leaves. If you have an equalizer in your pool and you use a vac plate, if you think logically about this picture, your vacuum will be sharing the suction with this main drain. So what you probably want to do to get maximum suction with your vacuum is put a number 10 or number 12 rubber plug in your equalizer line. So that way all of the suction can be drawn through the vacuum. Okay. And you probably have number 10 or 12 plugs lying around because we use them to winterize your pool. And if you don't, you can pick one up at the pool store. They're like a $5 part, not even. And the number 10 or 12 is based on what size your hole is. Some people have 1.5 inch hole size, and some people have 2-inch hole size. A number 12 plug would be for a 2-inch, and number 10 would be for 1.5 inches. And the numbers are listed on the plugs, and your pool store would know exactly what you meant if you said, I need a number 10 or number 12 plug. And that's it. Just remember to move the vacuum slowly. If you move the vacuum quickly, you're just going to end up suspending the debris in the water. So you want to move very slow and steadily with the vacuum. And that's all. And to take the vacuum out, you probably want to stop your pump because the suction is so powerful that it's very hard to overpower and pull the hose out of the skimmer. So you want to stop your pump, disconnect it, and then turn your pump back on. And you probably want to backwash after you vacuum if it's necessary, not before, because you now have sucked in a lot of debris into your filtration system and it may cause your pressure to go up. Okay. And having said that, we recommend that perhaps, now that you have a little bit of base knowledge, that you shouldn't be afraid to try new things and try to accomplish as many tasks as you can on your own if you're comfortable. And that's it. I wanted to say at this point, thank you for sitting. It was a good hour, 2 hours. It's a long time for all this information to be absorbed. Does anyone have any remaining questions? I'm going to leave some time here for a Q&A.
Hey, Mark. It's Mark here. I got a question for you. We spoke on the phone a couple weeks ago. My pool was winterized, and I had some landscaping done. They knocked the tarp into the pool.
Okay.
While they had some heavy machinery coming in the back and whatnot.
Right.
So all the ice that had contained all that leaf matter and debris fell into the pool, and then once the warmer weather started hitting, it melted and turned the pool green. And we had a pretty significant buildup of slime on the top layer of it. I'm just wondering, you guys aren't coming for a couple of weeks. And I skimmed a lot of those stuff off the surface of what I could. Is there anything I can do in the meantime, just to try to keep it at bay?
Not much. Johnny, do you want to take this? I would say at this point you don't have much of a choice. You're going to have to wait until we'll try. Is the cover completely off the pool altogether?
Yeah, it was like 90% off. I pulled it out this morning and then the water bag's out, and then cleaned it up as best I could. So right now it's not covering the pool at all.
So
once we come to open it, we're gonna shock it with 20 liters of chlorine, and once the system started up and cycling that chlorine, give it 48 hours, and it won't get rid of the big chunks of leaves. Like we'll do our best to scoop some of that out, but it sounds like you're doing a great job skimming what you can off the surface.
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised what that chlorine shock can do to clean it up.
I would just add to that, we as a policy don't like to reach down into the bottom of a green pool because we can't see what we're doing. So we have no idea what we could be pushing around. For all I know, you had a roof job done and there were roofing nails on your cover, and those fell down into the pool now that the cover has come off. So we need to see everything clearly before we move anything. So in one sense, yeah, like, okay, if you're confident that it's just leaves and you want to try to blindly scoop them up, go ahead. But I wouldn't want to push around a sharp rock, glass, a roofing nail, or anything else unless we can see what it is and determine how we want to deal with it. So the first thing we would likely want to do at that point is get your pool water to go clear again, and then come up with a decision after. We also have external vacuums that we can bring to your house. Like we have pool pumps with filters on movers dollies that we can use our own system to try to pick up a lot of your stuff without having to suck it through and vacuum your pool. But it depends on how severe it is and how wooded your backyard is. We would need to assess it on the day of the opening.
Okay. Do you mind just touching quickly on safety covers? We were considering purchasing one, and I know they're expensive, but we just wanted to hear from you what the plus and minuses are from them.
Sure. Well, if you, I mean, a tarp is $150 in most cases. So maybe it depends if your pool's a bit bigger, maybe $200. It can get annoying if you have tarp and water bags, because the water bags rarely survive the winter, and as you can see, your cover fell in.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times when the covers fall in, it's because the tarp wasn't sized properly. You want to get them really big so that they sit really relaxed on the pool. But with the tarps and the lock-in covers, the fitted tarps, the pool water tends to be much cleaner when you open the pool. With safety covers, the benefit is that all the rain and snow fills up your pool for you. Whereas with the tarp, when you take the cover off, the pool is still at the winterized water level, just below the jets, usually.
Yeah.
So you then have to top up with the garden hose. But with the safety cover, you get the free top up. But because it lets rain and water pass through, the water is usually a little cloudy or even green sometimes when you open with a safety cover.
Okay.
So there's pluses and minuses. Most people get safety covers. A lot of people get safety covers because of the aesthetics. They just look better. They're tight, but you really don't need a safety cover unless you have young children and you're worried about them falling in the winter, or you have a dog. If you have a dog, it's helpful. You can walk onto a safety cover and it'll dimple, and you might get your feet wet when you hit the water level. But the cover, if it's strong and installed properly, it won't collapse, and you can actually walk right across the pool. You shouldn't, but you can.
Yeah, no, we've got dogs, and we don't have kids ourselves, but I've got young nieces and stuff like that who come over pretty frequently. So,
Right.
And I just have one more question with regards to chemicals. I feel like I'm pretty on top of things, but would you what would be your recommendation for testing water at home? What do you find is the best product or the best way to test the water? Because I find strips sometimes they can be difficult to read, especially with pH.
Right. Yeah, strips they're okay. They're not accurate, and they can expire if you've kept them for too long. You probably you can use strips. You can buy yourself a Taylor kit, which is what you see the lifeguards usually using to check the water. That's the little tube with the drips.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more reliable than the strips. A tiny bit of a learning curve to learn how to use it. And they're about $200 for a good Taylor kit. And not all of it will last more than a year, and you'll have to keep reinvesting every year. But the easiest thing to do is take a sample to your local pool store.
Okay.
Most pool stores will check your water for free.
Okay.
And if you tell them your pool's volume, they'll advise you exactly how much of each chemical to add. Just be careful. A lot of the pool stores use a general chemistry schedule. And it might differ from your pool's chemistry based on what your salt system manual says. So be sure to advocate for yourself and say, hey, I don't want 50 parts per million of stabilizer. I want 30. And, I know, like, I can give you an example, like, I like Pool Village, which is at Keelan Major Mac. She only uses one generalized chemistry guideline, and it's okay. But she did advise one of my customers who had 30 ppm of stabilizer, which is the exact correct number for that pool, to add more stabilizer because her generalized stabilizer schedule recommended 50.
Yeah.
And stabilizer is not a cheap chemical. So it's good to know your pool's chemistry. Okay. And all of that can be found in the manual of your salt system. And if you can't find it there, all of the manufacturers have that manual digitized online. So just type in Hayward Aquarite PDF, Pentair IntelliChlor PDF, Jandy TrueClear PDF manual, on Google, and you can find it.
Okay.
And by the way, if even that's problematic for you, you can always call the company, and the tech support agent will tell you all of the chemistry for that pool.
Okay.
For that system.
And sorry, Jonathan, that device you had, is that the one that he was talking about there?
Well, yeah. So the pool stores would have this. This is what all our technicians have this for service calls. And you see, there's more than a handful of readings that you want to know and keep it all balanced.
And how
Whatever
much
that pool needs stabilizer, Johnny.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark.
I said that pool needs stabilizer. Oh, other Mark.
Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, sorry, no, I was just wondering how much is that? What you have in your hand? How much does that cost typically?
Oh, those are like
it's like a laptop.
Yeah, they're like $2,000, and each test costs us $3. It's a one-time use disc. I don't recommend that unless money is really no object for you.
Okay.
That's a pool technician's tool. But I mean, you could, if you want to invest in one, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
It's called a Lamont Spin Touch.
Yeah. Okay. Lamont Spin Touch. All right. Cool.
Yeah. I would imagine you'd have a lot of trouble even walking into a pool store and buying one. They'll have to they'll look at you with wide eyes and ask you why you want one, and then they'll probably have to call Lamont and order you one.
No. I don't think so. I was just curious.
Okay. Any other questions? Did we lose people's attention? Does anyone still have the energy to talk about chemistry? I guess not. How many participants do we still have? There's only 6 people left here. We've got Mark, someone with the initial R, and someone with the initial R, and we have Ryan. I guess we lost them. All right.
I might have some more questions, but I'll leave it until you guys arrive on the day in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
Can't wait to see you, Mark.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot for everything.
I'm just curious who I'm speaking to with the initial R. Who's the other gentleman?
So that's Rich. That's the person that's been asking maybe all the complicated questions.
No, not at all. Did you you're the only remaining. Ryan is a friend of mine, and he's probably sleeping and forgot his Zoom running. But you're the only remaining person here who would probably want to hear chemistry. Did you want to call it a night, or did you want to get some chemistry questions answered?
Honestly, I think the chemistry side of things is a whole 2-hour session by itself. I've spent a couple of years now trying to sort of master chemistry myself, and I've kind of given up on trying to sort of figure it out, because I've got there's pH ups, there's pH downs, there's muric acid and all that sort of stuff. I'm constantly trying to find a balance with. So
what area? Where are you located?
So I'm in Vaughan, so near Nellie McClung School.
Okay, are you a customer of ours?
No, I don't. No, I'm not. No.
Okay, and do you mind if I ask your first name? I just didn't catch it.
Yeah, Rich or Richard.
Oh, Richard. Okay. All right, Rich. Well, which salt system? Do you have a salt system?
I do have a salt system. It's a Jandy system with a Pentair sort of filter based system. I don't know a ton about it, but
That's okay. Do you have a Jandy True Clear or a Jandy Aquapure?
it's Aquapure.
Okay. All right. Give me 1 second, and I will. Did you want to go, or did you want me to show you a few things quickly?
Yeah, if you could show me a few things quickly, I'd appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, and one of my questions was last year I attempted to sort of try and get onto I was trying to use like an algaecide, like an anti-algae liquid that you can buy kind of like in like a 5-gallon or sort of 5-liter tub that I put in, but I don't really think it did much at all. It sort of just turned the water frothy. Do you recommend anti-algaecide kind of liquids?
It depends. It depends on the scenario and perhaps as a last resort. Does your salt cell look like this? Is that what you have?
I'll let you know when I see the screen. I don't see anything right now.
Oh, sorry. This one?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay, so you've got the Aquapure. Okay, do you know the chemistry for the Aquapure?
I don't off the top of my head.
Did you want to grab a pen and I'll give you the chemistry?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Please.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, free chlorine needs to be between 1 and 3 parts per million.
Okay.
Combined chlorine, anything less than 0.99 is within tolerance. Above 0.99, you want to shock the pool, or close to 1 ppm, time to shock the pool.
Okay.
Total alkalinity should be 80 to 120 parts per million.
80 to 120, okay.
And I would recommend you trying to get as close to 120 as possible.
Okay.
pH should be between 7.4 and 7.6. And I would recommend you trying to get as close to 7.4 as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Stabilizer is a tricky one. Below 30 degrees Celsius, and that's water temperature, you want to use 50 to 75 parts per million. 50, 75. You probably have never, I'm willing to gamble that you've never had your stabilizer up to 75 parts per million.
I would guess that, yes. Every time I go, because I would typically go to Pioneer Pools to get them to sort of do a quick sample check for me, and they're always things that add full stabilizer.
Right. Now, if you're above 30 degrees Celsius, you want to have 75 to 85, so even more. Now, so as you can see, there's one number that overlaps on both of those temperature ranges. So I would say aim for 75 and you'll be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Calcium should be 175 to 400 parts per million. And what is the medium of your pool? Is it fiberglass? Is it concrete, or is it liner?
It's concrete with a liner.
Okay, so you have a liner pool. Okay, so I would try to get as close to 300 as possible, 250 to 300, and get right in the middle of that range.
Okay.
Okay, and then your salt level 3.0 to 3.5 GPL. Now, I don't know if you caught in the presentation, you want 3,000 GPL times 1,000 is parts per million. So 3.0 is 3,000 and 3.5 is 3,500 parts per million. So the pool store might tell you in parts per million. Just drop the 2 zeros and put a decimal in there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so when you press the salinity button on your system, you should see 3.0 to 3.5 GPL.
Okay, I'll definitely check that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
and you want to make sure your water has no phosphates, or at least under 200 parts per billion, ppb.
Oh wow. Okay. No phosphates.
That's a big one for algae.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and obviously no copper and no iron.
Okay.
So I just want to talk to you about your algae problem. If your system is functioning properly, you are probably, I would imagine, just from guessing and just based on statistics, you probably don't have enough stabilizer in the pool. And what stabilizer does, chlorine gas is really unstable. It likes to dissipate under UV quite easily. So I would imagine that if you don't get your stabilizer level up to 75, you're probably not retaining enough chlorine.
Yeah,
So,
I think my main problem over the past couple of years has been, a fair amount of evaporation, a ton of obviously freshwater rain, and it can seem that it can turn overnight, right? It's such a fine balance to try and stay on top of. For a couple of days, we're swimming in the pool, it's a great temperature, but I find that if the pool's too hot, right, then that's encouraging the growth of algae. So
that is correct. But
Yeah.
have you ever checked your water for phosphates?
Yeah, I mean, definitely have. I've definitely sort of when I go into Pioneer Pool, they'll check it for that as well. And then I've had to put in brace. Is that where I put the muric acid to combat that? I'm not sure.
No, phosphate remover is usually called phosphorus, and you pour it into the skimmer with the pump running, and it usually clogs up your filter after 24 hours, and then you got to backwash.
Oh, okay. So I've definitely done that. I've got I've got a cartridge set filter, but
Okay,
I've definitely put that in before for sure.
Okay, so the one thing I would say is perhaps really focus on your stabilizer. Make sure you don't have a leak, because if you think you're getting, what temperature do you normally keep your pool at?
Here's the thing. I need to start sort of treating it a little bit more seriously, because I don't necessarily leave the pump on all the time. So this summer, we need to make a concerted effort to leave the pump on all the time. I put it on a timer previously to have it sort of run maybe 6 hours at night. But I think I need to start leaving it on all the time and make sure that, we like you mentioned earlier, leave it over 70-ish, so leave it about 23 degrees Celsius set, so the heating's on, so it really encourages the chlorine process.
Right. Yeah, I would just to get a baseline for your pool, I might encourage you to keep the pump running all the time and get all of those chemistry levels correct. Okay. Now, one normal byproduct of a saltwater chlorinator is that the pH constantly goes up over time. And you probably have noticed this almost every time you go to the pool store, they're telling you that your pH is high.
Yeah.
And that is a good and bad thing. One, it tells me that your salt system is working properly. But two, you must rectify it. Even though it's a natural byproduct of the salt system, you have to constantly lower the pH on a saltwater pool. So as the pH migrates up out of that range, the chlorine loses its efficacy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't drop the pH back to, that's why I recommended that you target 7.4. So you get ahead of that trend. You target to the lower side of the pH range. And then through the week, it'll trend upwards through 7.5 and 7.6, right?
I feel like I'm always putting pH down in it, and I feel like because of, let's say, the algae going in it, I'm almost like cleaning the filters probably like once a month, which I probably need to get filters as well.
Okay, so if you have an algae problem, number one, I would not shut your pump off until you no longer have an algae problem.
Yeah, exactly.
That's number one. Number two, I would algae requires three things to bloom: water, sunlight, and phosphates. Phosphates is plant food, right? When your neighbors call the weed man and they fertilize the lawn, you are essentially feeding the algae. That some of that fertilizer goes into the pool and raises your phosphate level. And the phosphates actually also they diminish the chlorine. So they inhibit the chlorine from doing its job, and they feed the algae. So it's a twofold problem. So if you have a high phosphate problem, you're more likely to have an algae bloom. Whereas if you get rid of the phosphates, the algae will have nothing to eat, and it'll be less resilient and more susceptible to being killed by the chlorine.
Makes sense. Does pollen have a lot of phosphates in it as well? Because there's certain times a year that there's a ton of pollen in the air around here.
It could be, well, first of all, there's a good, you said you're in Vaughan?
Yeah.
There's a good number of phosphates right in our tap water. There's almost some pools, when you first fill up the pool, there's already 1,000 parts per billion of phosphates from the tap.
Right.
And that's because phosphates, frankly, they're good for us too. So you even have to remove it from fresh water. But they also, if you talk to the salt system manufacturers and you ask, I'm surprised they don't really put it in the manual, but you could check in your TrueClear manual. It might have a little paragraph on it. It does say to get rid of all phosphates.
Okay.
Okay, or at least get it under 200. And that will help your algae problem and help you maintain your chlorine level. The second thing, so your problem, I would do 3 things. I would leave your pump running 24 hours a day.
Mhm.
Find a chlorine output level that gets you 3 ppm of chlorine consistently.
Mhm.
I would get your stabilizer up to 75 parts per million.
Mhm.
I would get your phosphates down to as close to 0 as possible.
Mhm.
And then once you've maintained a stable condition on your pool without having these algae blooms, which I suspect if you do all those steps, you will cease to have an algae bloom. But it might be already, is your pool already open?
I literally just took the cover off today.
Okay.
I've already shocked it, and I'm probably going to sort of dump in some salt, but I've not raised the water level yet.
Is it clear? Is your pool clear already, or is there still visible algae?
It's clear already. You know, there's a little bit of sediment at the bottom, but it's in really good shape.
Okay, so yeah, so then what I would do is I would run the pool like that, try to get everything to a condition where it's manageable and stable with the pump running 24 hours a day, 3 parts per million of chlorine, everything in perfect balance, remove the phosphates, and only then would I start to peel away layers, meaning then I would try running the pump for 12 hours instead of 24, and I would double the chlorine output percentage. So if it took you, with all other variables being equal, 20% output to achieve 3 ppm at 24 hours a day filtration time, I would bump that to 40% and run the pump for 12 hours. Therefore, you're getting double the chlorine output in those 12 hours that you had in to match the amount that you were getting in the 24-hour pump runtime. Are you following?
Yeah, makes absolute sense. I mean, kudos to you guys for staying on top of it all. Because for me, you know, there's been I've had so many ups and downs and things that I've got to try to figure out. But
right,
like
well, listen, we all have we eat, sleep, drink, and poop this stuff. You have a life. You probably have a profession or a career. So for us, this is our job. But for you, it's just it's kind of like if you decide one week not to cut your lawn, to cut your grass, big deal, right? But so don't be so hard on yourself. Just I'll give you but maybe decide, you know, what elements of your lifestyle interfere, and then maybe give up the cost of running the pump 24 hours a day if it helps with your algae problem, because it is really annoying when you want to use the pool and you have to either wait for the algae to clear up, or even worse, you need to wait for high chlorine levels to go down because you shocked the pool to kill the algae.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Rich, I just wanted to ask, talk about your AquaPure salt cell because you mentioned it earlier. So for sure, run your pump for 24 hours a day for maybe a week or two, just so we can get a baseline if that cell is even making chlorine for you. You would know that
because his pH was going up.
but I have a lot of customers with that AquaPure, and if we have no idea if he's only running it for 6 hours a day, that's not going to create a lot of chlorine in that time.
That's a good point.
So
that's a great point, Jonathan, because you know I think I've not changed my AquaPure, and I've had it for about 5 years, the actual sensor itself or the filter. So I think it may be time for me to start looking at that as well. But good point.
It
Yeah.
may be, there isn't a red light that comes on and says, oh, the cell's broken. All right. Like it's like Mark said, it's like a light bulb. It'll just die on its own and there won't be any indicator except if you have your pump running for 2 weeks straight and you have it on 80% or
And you're not, and you're
superchlorinate
not fi- yeah.
and you test your water and you have 0.02 ppm of chlorine, right?
Yeah, but make sure your stabilizer level is at 75 before you determine that the cell's not working.
Definitely.
Because with no stabilizer, you also won't retain any chlorine. Like if you, in a thought experiment, Rich, if you were to take a sample of water in a pool with zero stabilizer in it, so, and then you grab a sample of water right at the jet, right at the pool return, and you check it for chlorine, you might find 5 ppm of chlorine there. Now go to the total opposite side of the pool and take a sample all away from a jet, and you'll find 0 chlorine there. That's a perfectly unstabilized pool.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So
I mean, luckily I've got the digital sensor on the box that sort of, you know, gives me a reading. So I can
no. Your digital sensor does not give you a chlorine reading. It gives you a salt reading.
Yeah, sorry, a salt reading, yes.
That is not the same thing. The salt level is only a fixed range. You need to find out whether you have chlorine in the water. And the only way to do that is with some form of external test, whether it's test strips, using a Taylor kit, or taking a sample to a local pool store.
Okay.
Or calling a pool service company like us who charges per service call visit.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay.
Okay.
Like you said, I could do it from one side and get one reading, and the other side get something completely different.
Right. So so what stabilizer does, it sort of creates like a greenhouse for the chlorine gas. It's like you sealing a Tupperware, and it holds the chlorine in the water long enough for it to kill everything. Otherwise, the chlorine dissipates under the UV and the sunlight very quickly, and it doesn't have a chance to do its job. Okay. And then same thing with the phosphates. So your problem, I would say, is a 4-fold attack. You're going to leave the pump on 24 hours a day. You're going to increase your stabilizer level to 75 and try to get as close to 75 as possible. And you're going to get rid of all phosphates in the water and balance the alkalinity and pH. Keep all those ranges I gave you before you determine that your cell is dead. Try to get all of those ranges into range and have clear water, and see what happens.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
And then I would slowly scale back on see what happens. Perhaps your backyard is such that you cannot have only 6 hours. You might have to try 24 hours run pump time with double the chlorine output percentage. And then you could graduate down to maybe 12 hours or 6. You could try it then going to 6 hours, or try a third of the 24-hour period. Whatever it takes, you just may have to increase your rotation time. Pool chemistry sits on a tripod. Filtration, chemistry, and water movement. If you take out one of those legs, the stool falls over. You need circulation, filtration, and chemistry.
That makes complete sense. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, it's 10 o'clock. I'm happy to keep going, but if you have any more questions, you can always email me or Johnny or Doug. But do you have any other questions about chemistry?
No, I think I've got 100 questions about chemistry, but I need to find a baseline, like you just, you mentioned, so I can make an educated decision from there on the best step forward. But you've been really helpful. Really appreciate your time, and I've got your details, so I'll certainly reach out in the near future to ask maybe some more questions and get you guys over to have a look at my system and give me some advice.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's nice to meet you, Rich, and good luck. And of course, let us know if you follow up with us and let us know how our advice worked out for you.
Will do. Thanks for the investment, guys. Appreciate the time today.
Take care, Richard.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Yeah. Am I that boring that like it all tapered off from like 20 participants down to like 6?
A long stretch, but it's a lot of